Good morning, everyone. I'm going to call this special council, a committee of the whole meeting to order. It's 10 a.m. I'm going to be the chair for the bulk of this meeting, but there is going to be some presentations, at which point I will be handing over to Her Worship the Mayor for that part of the agenda. So I'd like to call now. I should advise that Councillor Smith should be joining us if he hasn't already. So if the adoption of the agenda, I'm wondering if I could call upon Councillor Waterfield to read 2.1 for us, please.
Certainly, Chair. That the agenda for the special committee of the whole meeting of November 18th, 2025 be adopted as presented.
Oh, that side. There we go. Disclosure of pecuniary interest or conflict of interest in general. Usual reminder that you can declare it now if you have one in relation to any part of the agenda, or if you notice one later on, just make me aware then. And at this point, I'm handing over to Her Worship the Mayor for presentations.
And thank you. And the fleet operations. He works on all motorized equipment and motorized and fire. This has a long history with the town for the recent 5 years. He was a co-op student and attending high school and also apprenticed with municipalities fleet mechanic. After graduation from college, he worked for several private and government agencies and then had the opportunity. Okay, is it parking lot or not?
Just for online.
To return to the municipality. Chris has several event certifications in his trade, including fire and electric vehicles. He originally graduated as a 310T truck and coach technician, but recently challenged himself to obtain the 310S automotive service technician. It's extremely rare to obtain both certifications, and the municipality has benefited from Chris's knowledge, education, and positive approach to equipment procurement and maintenance. Chris not only services the entire fleet, but he's taken opportunities also to operate equipment when field staff needed extra support. Chris takes this opportunity to review equipment maintenance, but also to consider the optimum use of fleet items when future replacements are required. Congratulations, Chris, on the milestone of 5 years of service with the town of Perth. So if you want to come on down.
Come on up, Chris. You're the next contestant. Years already. Wow.
During that time, he led the team to change, navigating new ways of doing our work best given. We're grateful for Michael's thank you, Michael.
Here, here.
Loudly again.
That Eliana is his goal to go from the 5 years of service. The past 5 years, they called has been an integral part of our payroll team, bringing not only dedication and professionalism, but also a sense of humor that brightens every day. Known for her artistic flair and creative spirit, she consistently looked for ways to improve both herself and the services we deliver. We are grateful for her contributions and proud to celebrate these milestones with her. We should. For some reason I get payroll reminders in my email.
Creative reminders.
Thank you. It was Megan Buchanan. Yeah, my daughter. She's dedicated 6 years of exceptional service to talent for serving as our client relations coordinator and committed to that keep us all connected. Her reliability, steady presence, and commitment to supporting both staff and community have been valuable. We're deeply appreciative of her strong work ethic and the meaningful growth she has shown in her role.
Here it is.
Appreciate being on the front line like she is and a lot of times, but some people are not very pleasant, but you never know when they feel. This Adam McGinnis, Chair of the Service. Adam works in the Environmental Services Department as a utility operator. Adam came to work with the municipality after working in the construction industry for many years. He now works as a key member of the field staff responsible for water distribution, wastewater collection, and road maintenance. He's obtained advanced certification and training under the Ministry of Environment legislation. Adam has a diverse skill set operating all the municipalities' heavy equipment, testing and sampling water. He also brings his carpenter skills to many maintenance projects with the municipality. Adam acts as a responsible member of the Environmental Service Department, where he supervises contracts, supports on-site maintenance for residents of Perth, brings a focused approach to his work, and also see as a professional in this role. Congratulations, Adam, on 6 years in service. Everybody knows. Yeah, it's service. I is a highly Brian is a highly respected member of the Development Services team, serving as the town's chief building official. He brings extensive knowledge and experience to this role. We're proud to have the part of the team. Here. I know some of the people at Brian know, use the, that easy, that's a good. Tracy Gold completed a 5-year law school with the town of Perth in 2024 and currently serves as executive clerk. Throughout her tenure, she's consistently demonstrated reliability, dedication, and a strong commitment to excellence. Her contributions are greatly supported the department's success. We're grateful for her hard work, proud to recognize her outstanding service. It sounds like tracking me down. Next is Neil McMillan, 15 years of service. Neil McMillan works with the environmental services in the water and wastewater department. His role focuses on the operation of the water and wastewater facilities. Neil is a graduate of the Algonquin College Water and Wastewater Operator Course. He came to work with the town of Perth after graduation from the program and has returned to the program as an instructor by passing on his experience and insight to other prospective operators. Neil is also known to most students at the Perth facilities and offer a placement to show off workplace. Since joining the Perth team, Neil has advanced to the Ministry of Environment certifications in both water and wastewater treatment. He plays an active role in the operations of facilities. However, his strength is troubleshooting issues and being a host for contractors working for the municipality at both treatment facilities. Neil's recent accolade received $700,000. He managed legal business and saves optimal operation. Congratulate Neil on his 15 years of service, and with him many more years of service. Thank you. And last, Steve Birchwell. You got your anthem on the unwavering leadership and guidance to the team. His experience and commitment have been instrumental in shaping a strong professional fire service. Steve's ability to lead with confidence and integrity has earned him the respect of his peers and the community. And accepting for him is shown. Thompson, 10 years of service and operator. Dave Thompson has dedicated 10 years to the department as a resourceful operator. Known for his pride and workmanship and reliability. Dave constantly and practical skills and problem-solving ability make him an essential part of the team. That community services acting captain. He served for 10 years and currently holds the role of acting captain. Justin leads by example, demonstrating professionalism and commitment in every aspect of his work. Leadership style fosters teamwork and trust, strengthening the department's operational. And next is Jeremy Kirkland, entering the service as captain. Jeremy Kirkland has recently been appointed captain and brings 10 years of dedicated service to the department, balancing a full-time fire crew of responsibility. Jeremy exemplifies commitment and passion for fire service. Leadership and experience enhance both his team and the community he serves.
Where do you get everyone back up here for a group shot?
Mayor Brown?
Check. Shot.
Hey, the gang's all here. Go ahead.
This is our new, it's like 20-year-old member. Here it is. He's gonna have his 1 month fire service.
Firefighter is great.
They're really gonna have to.
Yeah.
You gotta squeeze together, folks.
Thank you.
Judy? Well, I was not at the last committee of the whole meeting, and it was the 30th anniversary.
Yep.
And you being a former vice chair of the RBCA, I thought you'd like to have one.
Yeah.
So I picked up an extra one for you, so.
That's a good collection.
So we're going to move on to 5 staff reports and the matter that brings us all here for focus today in relation to the budget. Couple of things to let you know. Councillor Smith has joined us, so we're all together. And before I ask the director to present the principles for, or the budget proper, the mayor would like to say a few words. Your worship. Don't mind.
What is it? So, I'm sure we had it on. Okay, I'll start from the top. It's a little scary having, being responsible for the budget and actually having my name, mayor's budget, put on it as a label. I just wanted to say a couple of things before we start. This is very likely going to be the last budget that we do as a group. And we've seen quite a transition over the years since I've been on council. And much of the way we operated when doing budgets in the past has been how much of a tax increase the taxpayers can afford. But recently, we've become fully aware of the infrastructure gap and the high costs that replacing some of this aging buildings and equipment is going to entail. So I'd encourage us to not just consider how much can the taxpayers afford, but as well the long range view that we're going to leave for whoever is here next time around. We're looking at borrowing a significant amount of money for the first time in a number of years. So let's keep that in our at the back of our minds when we're doing all of these deliberations, and let's proceed.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just for council, to consider, if I can ask your indulgence on this. I know you've had a chance to read the presentation that the director is going to now make for the public, but can I ask you, please? She has designed the process so that you actually have a document in front of you can put your notes on. And if you had, she's provided periods where we can have questions in relation to that section. And then at the end of all that, I'm going to give council, at the end of the presentation, full rein to have full discussion over the whole presentation. Thank you.
Perfect. So good morning, everyone, and thank you for being here today. This being my first budget for the town, I really wanted to ensure that this presentation provided council as well as our residents with transparency on the process on how the budget was prepared, the various reiterations that took place to get to this point, and for everyone to gain a better understanding on the financial content that went into determining the tax levy. As this presentation has a lot more content than other presentations that I've done, it is also a little bit more scripted. I just wanted to ensure that I cover all the items I think are necessary to really capture this year's budget and the components that have made it up. Well, my clicker's not working. There we go. Thank you. So before we dive into the details, I just wanted to take a few minutes just to outline the format of today's presentation. As you just heard, as in other presentations I've done to council, I have left time open after each section of the presentation to open the floor for comments, questions, and any discussion before moving on to the next section. So I'd like to quickly walk through today's agenda, just so you know what to expect in the flow for the morning. So we're going to start off with an overview of the 2026 budget process, how it was developed, key milestones, and the timeline that's going to lead up to approval. Next, we'll do a quick review of the key principles and objectives that guided our approach and really the foundation behind the numbers. We'll then review the broader economic landscape, so inflation, interest rates, and other financial trends that impact the budget. I'll then provide a high-level overview of the 2026 budget key figures, the focus areas, and the overall direction. Under the operating revenues and expenditures, this is where we're going to take a deeper dive to look at where our revenues actually come from and how funds are actually spent across the different departments and services. We'll then briefly cover additional levy components such as reserve transfers and one-time operating costs. The capital planning and 5-year outlook. This section will be a bit more of a refresher from what we've spoken about in the summer and fall, but providing a bit more detailed information on the 2026 projects that are going to be undertaken during the year. The reserves and debt management, next again, a bit more of a refresher, just to discuss the overview of our reserve and debt positions, but highlighting any trends and sustainability indicators. The tax levy and the impact on the taxpayers. This, for me, is likely the most important part of our presentation, to really discuss how the proposed tax levy would impact the average taxpayer. We'll then review some key risks and cost pressures the municipality will have to monitor in 2026, and finally close off with next steps and approval timelines, where we'll discuss the process and what changes the new strong mayor powers has in potentially delaying the approval process of the budget. So the process began with departmental submissions in October, where each department provided their needs financially to ensure that they could maintain current service levels in each of their respective areas over the next year. These submissions were also during the same time we completed our public engagement through our coffee sessions with Nev and having our budget survey open to our residents to provide feedback on the budget and provide any insights or concerns they may be having. Treasury then consolidated the feedback received and validated department requests by reviewing financial data over the last few years to ensure that the amounts being requested were in line with what was actually being spent by the town year over year, while also ensuring alignment with strategic priorities. So we are now in the draft stage with council deliberations scheduled throughout November and early December, with aiming with an adoption of December 9th. So to really provide insight on the process, I wanted to ensure council and residents that we did not just take the initial asks that were given and to create our tax levy. The actual initial projections showed an actual 12% increase. And to be honest, it was actually more than that. And many in this room can attest that I wasn't able to sleep that night, knowing that even though this was the levy that was required to sustain the town, I understood it wasn't affordable for our residents. So through further discussions and being as conservative as possible on projected increases for the OPP and cutting any perceived discretionary spending, we were able to bring the levy to 8.5%. But even then, I understood that that would seem high, and staff were really determined to bring that down. So even though we were having discussions of bringing in new revenue streams for 2026 to see how that would go, we understood that we'd actually have to bring some of that revenue into fruition. So staff actually worked really hard, and we decided that there would be new initiatives for new revenue streams of about $130,000 in new revenue. And they did more cost-saving measures to reduce expenses by over $306,000, which brought down the target to 7%, the levy to 7%. So some of these new revenue streams were going to be new administration fees in finance, looking for sponsorship to offset some of the training costs. So our fire chief had thought of sponsoring a firefighter through their training, which I think was really great. Establishing the municipal accommodation tax in Perth, increasing pool membership fees, looking at sponsorship for other events in town, and increasing our monthly parking rates. So this slide just outlines some of the cost reductions the town has taken for 2026, that we were actually able to reduce the initial calculated tax levy by 3%. So again, here's our timeline and just where we currently sit in the budget cycle.
Any questions in relation to that section of the presentation? Councillor Bolt.
Thank you, Chair. Nev, the municipal accommodation tax implementation, can you just bring me up to speed on exactly how that's going to impact people that stay in this town?
Yeah, usually, and I mean, I know Kathy's here as well if she wants to add more to it, but what it is a tax that's on mostly hotels. It can be to anywhere that there is other lodging, like Airbnbs and things like that. And I know for 2026, I think we were just focusing on the hotels within the area, that there is a tax that's added onto your room charge, and that comes directly to the municipality.
And is this being done in most other communities, just not here?
Yes.
Okay.
Can I just ask the director, can you move the mic slightly further to you?
Too
There.
loud.
Perfect, thank you.
No problem.
I saw Councillor McRae's hand, I believe.
Thank you, Chair. So if I have a few questions, if I may ask.
Yeah,
through
in
you,
relation
Chair.
to that section.
So the first question I have for our financial director has to do with public engagement. So I just want you to remind the council that during the public engagement, there was already also a survey done. And if you could just remind the council of the findings of that survey.
Sure, through the chair. The public engagement really discussed on a number of things. One was maintaining service levels. That's the way that they currently were. A lot of the information that came up was roads and make sure their roads kept up to date. Ensuring transparency in how we are communicating, where we're spending funding and how we're spending funding. And there was other items in regards to development. So making sure that we're kind of moving on development, but also ensuring that we are keeping our developers held accountable for what needs to be done in that section as well.
Thank you. And my other question has to do with slide number 7, sponsorship for various events. Who will be responsible for following through with that?
I think collectively, sorry, through the chair, I think collectively as a management team and our staff that we'll be working on to see which events would make sense to have sponsorship this year. Again, these were things that we were thinking we would try in 2026 and not actually bring any revenue into the budget just because we're not sure of how it will go. So I think it will be a broader discussion of what events we think will benefit from that, and then working with that director particularly to move that going forward.
And my last question is on slide 8. Decreasing materials and supplies expenses in relationship to the Crystal Palace, Heritage Administration and Property Management. I guess one of my concerns in regards to that is we already know we're dealing with aging infrastructure, and by decreasing materials and supplies, is that going to, by any shape or form, jeopardize these facilities, like the state of these facilities, and also the service level that we expect to get from these facilities?
Yeah, through the chair, I think that's a great question. And so the costs that you're looking at on that slide, those are all operational. So it has nothing to do really with the capital costs on that.
Yeah.
And for all the cost reductions, we work together as a team. So I would have sat with the respective director, had conversations about costs in the past, what they were expecting for the following year, and where we both felt comfortable that it would maintain the current service levels at that amount.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions on that section? I saw Councillor Waterfield and then Deputy Mayor. Thank you.
Chair, not a question, but simply a statement. I want to compliment staff on uncovering new streams of revenue and for the cost reductions they've uncovered for 2026. I thought that was a great initiative, so thank you very much.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor.
So Nev, will you be talking later in the presentation about the OPP costing? Number one, the costing just to have OPP services, and number two, the court security costs and how that affects our tax increase?
Yes, through the chair, it will be in the operating revenues and operating expenses
Thanks.
section.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you. If you could move on.
So our guiding principles remain consistent as in prior years, and as we discussed in the summer and earlier this month. The principles that create the foundation of our budget are to be aligned with strategic priorities, focus on financial stability, support our infrastructure renewal, and have a commitment to continuous improvement and transparency. Our budget principles mimic and support the guiding principles in that the budget is based on ensuring we maintain current service levels, which we all heard from our residents through the budget survey and the Coffee with Nev. Ensure that we use our debt and reserve strategically, prioritize capital renewal, and ensure that our user fees are reflecting to the point possible cost recovery. So the budget objectives I find are really how we're going to ensure that we're meeting our guiding and budget principles. So for financial stability, that will be achieved in this budget by ensuring that we maintain positive reserve balances. And this will only be possible by implementing rate increases. To support and ensure we maintain our current service levels, we ensure that the budget funded essential services such as roads, water and wastewater, fire protection, and recreation. To ensure that we support our infrastructure renewal, we review the asset management plan and prioritize our capital projects to ensure that we complete what was needed when needed. And to promote transparency and accountability, we're having this presentation and shared the documents with our residents, and we've ensured that they all align with the Municipal Act's requirements. And finally, to ensure we are planning for growth and demographic change, this really relates to every year looking at what the current service level is, what it means for an increased population and our changing demographic, and ensuring that those changes are incorporated in the operating and capital budgets.
Thank you, Council. That's another opportunity to ask questions. Let's see any hands. Oh, Councilwoman McRae.
Through you, Chair. I guess the slide I would like just a little bit of clarification on is 15, plan responsibly for growth and demographic change. At this present time in the town of Perth, do we know exactly how many homes are actually owned by residents and how many properties are actually rental investments?
Through the chair, I do have the number of homes. It was something I looked at when I was doing the budget. I don't have it at the top of my head right now. In regards to how many are rental units compared to owners, I don't have that information, but I can see if I can get that. Sure.
Okay, I'd like that. Thank you.
Thank you. Worship.
Well, this isn't a question, but rather a comment. I know we're midway through, but my congratulations on this budget. I mean, you weren't involved in municipal finance before. This is the most comprehensive budget I've seen in my many years on council. My congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, could move on. Thank you.
So there are a few items that impact our budget and the numbers that we use that need to be monitored on a regular basis. The first one that we all know and we're all affected by is the CPI, the Consumer Price Index. The CPI is a common measure of inflation. It tracks how much the average cost of goods and services changes over time. It is a way to really measure how much more or less it actually costs to live compared to last year. CPI looks at everyday items like groceries, gas, clothing, utilities, and housing. When CPI goes up, it means prices in general are rising. For municipalities, this matters because the cost of providing services like road maintenance, recreational programming, fuel for vehicles, and wages often increases with inflation. So when we talk about the budget and its pressures, CPI often explains why some costs go up even when service levels stay the same. For the following year, the CPI was 2%. So the Building Construction Price Index measures how the cost of construction materials and labor changes over time. It is similar to the CPI, but instead of focusing on regular goods and services, it focuses on things like steel, concrete, lumber, asphalt, and skilled trade costs. When this index increases, it means that building or maintaining infrastructure like bridges, arenas, and water facilities has become more expensive. This is important to note because even if we build the same number of projects every year, the total cost can rise significantly due to higher material and labor costs. That's one of the main reasons our capital budgets need to increase over time. Not necessarily because we're building more, but it just simply costs more to build. So the construction price index for last year was over 3.7%. So how do these things impact our town's budget directly? Inflation impacts utilities and construction costs. We noted year over year that our actual utility costs have increased by $91,000. And as we spend more, there's less funding left in our reserves to earn interest income on. So it is expected that our interest income will decline by around $100,000 in 2026. Both of these items are equivalent to roughly about 1% of the tax levy. Another area that has a large impact on our town's budget is our grants that we receive from the provincial and federal government. Grant funding always remains uncertain, with some confirmed amounts like our OMPF, that's at $1.6 million, which actually increased for the following year, which is great. And some of you may have heard in the federal budget tabled earlier this month that there was a discussion about $51 billion over the next 10 years for building community strong funds for local infrastructure. We're not really sure at this point how that will translate to funding at the municipal level, but we'll be diligent to follow how that progresses and how it will impact next year's budget. The following slides outlines the grants we've received in the past and the likelihood of receiving them in the future. The budget is really based on assumptions, and these grants are a major piece of the puzzle. Not receiving grants from one year to the next can really change the budget year over year. Other key elements that go into shaping our budget are pressures for wages and collective bargaining, legal and engineering costs and their requirements as the town continues to develop, our reserves and debt capacity requirements, and property assessments.
If I may, at this point, I forgot to mention right at the beginning that at the end of the presentation, I would be encouraging each council member, should they wish to do so, to make a statement of where they stand generally on the budget. And I should have included that when I meant questions about each section that's just come up. I anticipate there will be questions in this one. Councillor Waterfield, I saw you first.
Thank you, Chair. Through the Chair to Nev. In this section, there are multiple grants for 2026 at 50% probability of attaining those grants. If we do not receive 50%, how are we going to finance the gap? Would that mean that we'd be borrowing? That means we go into more debt. How much potential debt is that? How does it affect the budget? And ultimately, could it affect our ARL?
So through the chair, those are great points. So I'll start one. Yes, it would affect our ARL because it's not revenue that we're generating within the municipality. I think when I'm saying 50%, those are really, it could go either way. So some of those grants are things that we normally receive every year, but we know that the funding is starting to decline. So how much it will actually decline to, I am not really sure of. So the total dollar value would be about 50%. I think we would still receive some funding. It's just not the total funding that would be there. I wouldn't say that if the grants weren't received that we would go to debt financing. Usually what would happen, and I'll explain a bit later in the presentation, is that it would have to come out of the reserves for any offset that we would need.
Sorry, and through the chair, if I can just add to that too. The first two items on here are the RIDE program, for example. If we don't get the funding for it, we're not authorizing the RIDE program to occur. The police community safety grant is now, I think it's being transitioned to the county. So again, if we don't get it, then program or service levels get cut with that. So, and then the court security is a whole other discussion. So.
Thank you for the clarification.
Councillor McRae.
Thank you, Chair. So I'd like to refer, I keep referring to these slides, great presentation. I'd like to refer to slide 19. So under building and construction costs, the price index on a year-over-year basis, construction cost growth has been 0.7% to 3.8%. And then just down further, it says, when budgeting for capital projects, we need to assume a higher than CPI amount greater than 2% due to labor, materials, and specialized services. Yet, if we go back to slide number 14, which is ensuring long-term financial sustainability, it says implement rate increases of 7% for property tax, 6% for water and sewer, and 1% for capital levy. Can you explain that to us? The 1%, when in fact, construction costs are going up 3.7 to 3.8%. And in this other slide, it's also saying we need to be having a greater than 2% for labor, materials, and specialized service. So it's like, will we have enough with 1%?
So through the chair, the CPI, the construction price index, that's how we actually price. So if we do our asset management plan and we have costs in there from today of what we expect it to be, that's how much we would increase the pricing to be for next year. So when we go to, when they are in our budget, the price is already reflective of the 3.5%. The capital levy that I'm proposing for the 1% is really just to take it and strictly put it into our reserves for using at another date or to use to other capital projects. So they're not one and the same. So the construction price index would be to really understand how much it would actually cost to do that. Yes, it would be great to have a 3% capital levy and you can increase more. I know that it's not something that the town has put forward before. So starting at something that was, I thought, a bit more reasonable just to kind of go through that with the 7% levy increase that I'm proposing is why I put it at 1%.
Just one additional. I guess my bigger question is, will 1%, like we haven't got into the asset management part of this slideshow, so maybe I'll just back up and wait till we get to that.
Okay.
I'm just concerned that the 1% will be enough. Anyway, we'll get there when we get
Yeah.
there. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions on that section? If I may ask a question, is it fair to say, and is it worth remembering, when you look at CPI, both of them, the two CPIs, and why it has to be that confusing, appear to be lower than they used to be.
Okay.
Prices don't fall back. It's the effect of compound. And
That's
that's
right.
2% on top of all those larger. Is that fair to say?
Through the chair, yes, that's fair to say, for sure.
Thank you. Any other questions? No, thank you. If you could move on.
So this is really just the one page of the key assumptions that have been used to develop the 2026 draft budget. It is based on a total operating budget of $3.4 million, a capital budget of $3.8 million, and these amounts represent about a 20% increase year over year. The budget proposes a tax levy increase of 7%, plus a 1% capital levy for infrastructure renewal. When looking at the numbers, I really want you to think that every $100,000 in the budget would equal about a 1% change in the tax levy.
Okay, that was very quick,
was
but
okay.
I'm certain there'll be questions. Your worship.
Thank you. We had the preliminary budget discussion at county last week, and they have the advantage of getting an increase in revenue from the increased assessment in several of the municipalities. And they use that, as the CAO expressed it, to smooth the increase in the tax levy. So the assessment people aren't going to start reassessing until, we keep putting it off, next year at the earliest. I wondered if you could comment on, we have increased assessment from buildings infilling. I wondered if you could comment on what effect the increase in assessment will make in this budget and perhaps smoothing the tax levy.
So through the chair, there hasn't been a full assessment done for the properties within the municipality. So that does affect it, because I think if an assessment was done and some of the homes were reassessed at what their actual values are at, it would have helped in regards to smoothing out some of the newer homes that may be paying a bit higher taxes, where their property assessments are now more close to what their values are in that regard. So at this point for the 2026 budget, it wouldn't have had any impact because they weren't completed during the year.
Even though there has been an increase in assessment because of new builds?
So yes, those new builds would have a different assessment value, but the total majority of the properties within town would not. So basically your tax rate is adjusted by the tax levy. So those rates, it all depends on whether it's a residential, commercial, on the different types of properties that they have. So depending on where the assessments are, yes, you would have based on the value, maybe a bit more coming in, but the overall wouldn't affect this year the majority of the difference in being able to bring the tax levy down.
So it doesn't really affect the tax levy very much?
Not at this point. If it was done throughout the whole municipality, then yes, I do believe that it would even it out more for those who have an assessed value that's closer to their selling value or to their amount than those that are really assessed at a lower value at this point.
One last point, some treasurers in the past have felt that it was not a good procedure to use increased assessment in calculating the tax. They'd rather put it into reserves, but you're saying that you've used it to counteract the tax levy?
Yes, I really, sorry, through the chair, I really just have used the same information that I had last year in regards to the amounts. We do have tax spreadsheets that include all the different rates and all the assessments that we have at all the different amounts to come up with the levy amount and how much that would translate into tax amount. So it is taken into account when that levy is proposed to all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Smith, Councillor Bolt, and then Councillor Waterfield.
I just want to make sure that I understand this statement that every $100,000 cost adds 1% to the tax levy. That seems very high. Am I understanding it correctly?
Yes, you are at through the chair at this point. So if let's say, we're sitting at a 7% and you wanted to propose, or we wanted to propose, 6%, that would mean that we'd have to find another $100,000 in revenue, or we need to cut $100,000 out of the budget to make that happen.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Councillor Bolt.
Thank you, Chair. Nev, when it comes to the actual amount, the 7% or whatever it is we agree on, how does that impact, other than residential, how does that impact commercial and industrial?
So through the chair, that is a great question, because I wanted to have a better understanding myself, being this my first time. So that's why we talk about the tax levy. So the tax levy is kind of based up proportionate, and it will be applied to all the different tax rates. And the tax rates are what is different between property, commercial, and anything else that's in there. So the 7% would be applied to each rate that is already there.
So in effect, it's still a 7% increase.
Exactly.
And that raises a
different
concern
rate.
for me, in the sense that, we know that there are businesses failing at a higher rate every day. Storefronts are going empty, not just in our town, but all over the province. We have very uncertain times coming at us. The federal government just passed a very inflationary budget, narrowly, unfortunately. So my concern is it all trickles down. As we lose businesses, we lose income from those businesses as well. And I fear for the future of some of the businesses we have in town. So I'm going to leave my comment at that. I had one other question. I have a follow-up comments at the end of the presentation. Year over year change from 2025 is 20% increase in expenses from both capital and operating. Am I reading that correctly?
That's the operating expenditures that's the 20% change from last year's amounts that we had in the operating budget to this year's amount.
So we're going to spend 20% more than we did last year.
Correct. If you wanted to look at it that way.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you, Councillor Wolffield.
Through the chair to Nev, while we are talking about this year's budget, I have two questions. With what you know now, looking at the near and midterm, i.e. the next 3 to 5 years, would you anticipate recommended tax increases in the 7% range, number one? And number two, expenses will keep rising each year. So as our treasurer, in terms of revenue streams, do you have any thoughts or suggestions whereby we can increase our revenues or look at other revenue streams apart from the current ones that we have?
So through the chair, I think that's a great question. Those are great questions. So one, I think in regards to the levy, it really does determine what happens throughout the year. But I do think at where we are at in regards to our reserves and what we're looking at in regards to asset management plans and our operations in general, that you would need an increase year over year. What my hope is that, you know, your increase will maybe decrease in the property level, but you're still keeping that same increase using a capital levy to replenish your reserves and things like that. The issue being that if you don't, that you are going to have 1 year, and as we go through the asset management plan and we look at, you know, the forward looking, is that you're going to have 1 year that maybe you have a lesser increase this year, but 2 years from now you're doubling it. So I think that's kind of where what would be ideal is that you're just leveling it out so that you are having a slight increase every year, but nothing that's shocking to our residents. And in regards to the revenue streams, that's kind of what we spoke about a little bit earlier before. I do agree that we need to figure out different ways of making revenue within the municipality. So some of those things are just introducing fees that, you know, other municipalities have already always had in place that we haven't had here. Looking at sponsorship for different things that might offset costs that we are spending right now through the revenue streams that we have already. And just looking to increase kind of our user fees and membership fees to be more in line with what cost recovery is.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Could I have a quick follow-up?
You can have a follow-up.
Thank you. You mentioned, if I heard you correctly, that some other municipalities are charging fees that we are not. If so, could you give an example? I'm just curious.
Yeah, sure. So through the chair, so just specifically in my department, I will say in finance that there are fees and charges for arrears notices to be printed. And so like, let's say you were late on a water bill, there would be a charge that would be added onto that. Or if, you know, especially when people are selling homes and that you need a rush on a tax certificate or anything like that, there would be an extra charge for things like that, that we haven't been applying in the municipality at this point.
Thank you.
Your worship.
Am I interpreting correctly what you've said, that if we don't, you know, you've done all the calculations and it would appear that a 7% increase is a good idea. So are you saying that if we don't increase the taxes by 7%, that eventually it will catch up to us?
Through the chair, yes, that's what I am saying. I think this is a reasonable amount. Like we had said at the beginning of the presentation, it wasn't the first amount that I came through. I really worked hard with our staff to really think of a number that would be affordable as much as possible to our residents, as well as keep the municipality financially sustainable. So to me, if we don't complete this plan, then we are still dipping into our reserves. We're not kind of changing where we are financially. And then we'll continue to go that mode. And then I think at one point in the next few years, more recent than not, that your proposed increase will have to be higher than that 7%.
Mm-hmm. I remember one year when we voted for a 0% tax increase, and I still look back on it and think how foolish that was, because it catches up.
Any further questions on that section? Thank you. If you could move on.
Doesn't want me to move on. Oh, there we go. Okay, perfect. Thank you. So this is just really going into the details. So for our operating revenues and expenses. So for operating revenues, we are looking with that tax levy of $10.6 million, which represents the 7% increase, as well as only $98,000 in the capital levy, which would be used strictly for capital reserve replenishment and capital costs for the year. Other revenues are grant revenues, which we are expecting to increase based on confirmed increases in our OMPF grant, but then that we're expecting an offset decrease from grants for the OPP and other one-time grants. Our cost sharing is expected to increase as a result of the CPI, and our water and sewer revenues are expected to increase as a result of the 6% increase in water and sewer rates. Our POA revenues are looking steady with no real changes. And as discussed, we expect our investment income to decrease hopefully only by $100,000 as a result of our declining reserve amounts and therefore not having as many funds available to invest. Our licenses and permit revenue is expected to increase as a result of an increase in building and parking permits, as well as tax certificate issuance fees. And finally, we would expect an increase from about $100,000 from additional user fees and rentals this coming year, which is included in that other revenues bucket. So this is just a really high level of our revenues. Our total revenues expected in 2026 is about $19.8 million. From that, 10.6 of that is from taxes and 3.8 is from water and sewer revenues. So if we actually take those other two revenue streams away, our actual revenues from internal operations, not including water and sewer, is about $5.3 million. So I wanted to reiterate that that revenue amount would have resulted in an 8.5% tax levy. But as we discussed earlier, we are determined to have an extra $130,000 in new revenue for the town, which would increase our total operating revenues to $5.4 million. So if we go into our expenses consist of salaries and benefits, which includes the result of the pay review completed earlier this year. Utilities, which we have discussed, which are expected to increase and were actually adjusted in the 2026 budget to really align to what's being spent year over year. Our OPP contract is expected to increase as a result of salary increases and the need for additional officers to be in attendance at the provincial court here located in town. Staff really worked hard here and were able to decrease expenses related to professional fees and contracted services to offset some salary costs and complete more work in-house where possible. Our grants to others remain consistent with prior years, with a slight increase from our partnership agreement with the library, which was really in line with our annual expectations. Other costs increased in direct relation to the new cleaning contract at the pool, but were also offset by cost savings in fuel and material and supplies where possible. So an overview of the expenses are that total expenses are about $16.4 million, with $2 million being in relation to water and sewer. So total operations for the town other than water and sewer is about $14.3 million. So having completed many consulting and audit engagements in my time, I've always been asked the question on why salaries are such a large portion of expenses in service organizations. So I just wanted to explain this just in case anyone else felt the same way. So as I mentioned, we are a service provider. Our budget is based on providing a certain service level to our community. Therefore, a significant portion of our budget goes towards the people who deliver the services in our community. This includes keeping our roads safe in the winter, and to maintaining our parks, to responding to emergencies, and supporting local events, All these services rely on skilled staff. Investing in our people is really how we provide reliable and responsive services to our community. And based on the budget services, our residents do want our services to remain the same. I was also curious when completing the budget to see where we sat in terms of how much our salaries actually took up all of our expenditures. We are currently at approximately 45%. And when compared to other municipalities with the same type of infrastructure, we are right in the same ballpark. The figures that you see were all taken from the audited financial statements on the municipalities' respective websites and are all from 2023 to 2024. So I would actually expect that their labor amounts to be higher than they actually are in these calculations. So just as a recap, based on our operations, we have an operating deficit where our expenses exceed our revenues by $8.9 million, which would require funding through the tax levy.
Okay, questions? I see the Deputy Mayor and Councillor Waterfield in that order. Sorry, the Mayor and the Councillor Waterfield in that order. Go ahead, Your Worship.
Yes, in past discussions, there have been some suggestions that we could possibly reduce costs by reducing staffing. But one of the things that you discovered when you did these conversations with people was that they didn't want service levels to decrease. And I can tell you from being in town hall fairly often and in communication with not only Michael, but other directors, our staff is, as it exists, is presently working to a level that's almost reached unsustainable. There's no way that we could provide the service that we're providing now with any less staff. So I think that's a no-go as far as saving costs. My second question is, and you may plan on dealing with this, is there's a 1% for capital levy. Could you elaborate on what capital levy is intended for?
Yes, through the chair. So the capital levy is really intended to replenish our reserves, to be put away and not used to kind of replenish our reserves or to just be used on capital projects going forward.
So I remember during the interviews for treasurer, one of the candidates mentioned that even though the saying is that development pays for development, there's still costs to the town for supplying some of the services to that development and so on. And it concerned me that, how are we going to put away money so that we can meet those expenses? So that's one of the major reasons for the capital levy. Thank you.
Councillor Waterfield.
Thank you, Chair. When I was looking at your stats with regards to other municipalities, it stated that Tay Valley, their salary ratio was 34% of expenses. Mississippi Mills was 37%. Do you know if they're providing the same level of service or if they're not providing some services that we are? I'm just curious as nearby municipalities.
Yes, through the chair, that's exactly it. So through the chair, yes, that is it. So I would compare ourselves more to Carleton Place and Smith Falls just because they have the same kind of infrastructure that we have. So Tay Valley, and sorry, I can't remember the other one right now. But yes,
Mississippi Mills.
thank you. They don't have the same kind of infrastructure or service levels that we would have here. I think one of the other things that I did want to bring up, and it's actually not in the presentation, so it's great that you brought it up, is that I do think our municipality is a hub. So there is a lot of infrastructure here that not only our residents use, that everyone uses. So it's not like, the population of Perth is just using this and over time, we need to replenish it. There are other municipalities using our services, a lot of our services, which requires that difference as well.
Yeah, thank you for that response. And I think you've brought up a really important point that we really are a hub for the county and the surrounding area. And we do have a lot of infrastructure that we need to maintain that other surrounding municipalities would not. So thank you for that.
Councillor Bolt.
Yes, Chair. So Nev, getting back to the salaries and benefit increase of almost $500,000 from 25 to 26. You say here that includes changes from the 2025 pay review. And my recollection on the math on that one, if I extrapolate it out to about a year, is about $100,000 baseline increase, which leaves between $300,000 and $400,000 additional costs in revenue. In expenses for salaries and benefits year over year. Is that because we've hired a whole bunch more people, or is that because is that part of the rank and file negotiated settlement that's also been given to the non-unionized people? Like, can you break that down a little bit more for me?
Sure, through the chair, I think to really go into details in regards to salaries and expenses, it would be something that I think we should go in camera for, because I think it would kind of expose kind of where we are in regards to that area.
Sure.
I did provide, I believe, in the packages that were provided where we are in regards to the number of employees. So the number of employees has not changed significantly.
Okay, so I can get answers to my questions in camera then.
Yes, through the chair. Yep.
I'm quite prepared to entertain at some point, perhaps at the end of the presentation, should you wish to.
I don't need it like that. It's a question that I'm concerned about. I mean, a $500,000 increase over 1 year in salaries and benefits is a significant amount of money.
And it's fair, and I want to get you the answers to your question. If it has to be in camera, I'm just thinking of where we schedule it.
If that's the will of council, that's fine, but I don't necessarily need it today, but I would like to know it before this budget is passed.
Okay, perhaps in the break, I can speak to the clerk and see where we are on that.
Thank you.
Your worship.
Just to elaborate a little bit on Councillor Waterfield's question, one of the reasons that expenses are a little bit lower in, say, Almont, for example, it's Mississippi Mills, and quite a bit of it is rural, and expenses for rural are less than they are for urban. And the other thing is Carlton Place, they apparently had a road superintendent, chief of environmental services, who had a great foresight. And so this is when lots of grants were still available, and he divided the town up into sections and did the replacement of sewers and so on piece by piece. So they're not as far behind the 8 ball for that sort of thing as we are.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yeah, Councillor Bolt.
I'm sorry, I did have one more. It's probably in here, and I think I've read it, but could you remind me what our current reserve is for water and sewer? Like, what's the balance of our reserve?
It will be further in the presentation.
Okay.
So if that's okay with you, otherwise
Yeah,
I'll
no.
just have to go through the slides to get the number.
That works. I thought I read it somewhere.
Yeah.
That's good for me.
No problem.
If I may, my question sort of links some of the things that have come up here already. In relation to the extra court costs, I'm fully aware that Perth is not the major contributor to business at the court. But we find ourselves in a position, again, for paying financing for other people. Can you tell me, or perhaps the clerk or the CEO know the answer to this? Is it legislated that it's just us because the court's physically in our location? Or have we room to start saying to our neighbors, we need help on this because you're contributing to the business at the court?
So through the chair, I'll start, and I think Michael can add to this. So number one, I want to say that the number that I had put in there for the OPP cost is actually significantly less than what I had started with, just because I know that what it would have done to the tax levy would have been high. So that is being a very conservative amount that I have put in there, because I think it is, I believe, 3 new officers to be stationed at the police and this salary increase. My understanding is that it's legislative, but I think you can allude to that more.
Yeah, so through the chair, it is legislated that we pay for the court security costs. There is other municipalities in Ontario that have exemptions in legislation. Oxford County and the regional municipalities all have it split up amongst the lower tiers. There are contributing municipalities. So that's something that Ed and I have discussed already at some length. He's discussed or brought it up at or had conversations, I think, at the police service board, or at least with some staff. Just submitted a delegation request this morning for Roma, asking for the province to look at adding us to that list as well. I don't think any of our neighbors right now have any willingness to want to contribute out of the goodness of their heart, but it is something that we're looking at advocating and lobbying for.
Thank you. The other thing I just wanted to mention, because of something that Her Worship said, and again in relation to sharing, which is going to come up, and our neighbours, sometimes when we compare with Smith Falls and Carlton Place, we're comparing apples and pears because of their size and because of their wider footprint than us for development. But our immediate neighbours, following up on what the mayor said, Tay Valley, population around 6,000. We know what our own population is. Lanark Highlands, about the same. Drummond North Elmsley is around 9,000. And they don't have the infrastructure costs that we have. They have extra roads to surface, but they have nothing in relation to sewage, water provision. And I just throw that out there for our knowledge and for our residents' knowledge as well. Okay, seeing no further questions, if we could move on. Thank you.
So there are other costs that are included in the calculation for creating the tax levy. One-time operating costs, which are costs that are required for the year but not expected to recur year over year, are expected to be around $622,000. This total includes major projects like the new financial system, planning software, costs for the upcoming election, the rental of the garage trailer at the ES Garage, and other one-time projects that are expected throughout the year. Other costs that drive the levy are our reserve contributions. For water and sewer rates, any surplus that's actually made from water and sewer operations cannot be used to offset other town operations. The excess funds must be set aside in a water and sewer reserve or to offset any other capital costs in that area. So for 2026, the water and sewer access would actually be about $1.7 million. Further, the town's budget is based on a cash basis. So it does not include non-cash items that are used in our financial statements. So things like amortization on our assets, which is about $3 million per year, our deferred revenues and prepaid expenses, those are not included in that budget. So these items also need to be taken into consideration when looking at the budgets being proposed. Further, the budget for the municipality is a zero-based budget, which means if there is a deficit, so our expenses exceed our revenues, the town must use reserves to bring the budget and operations to zero. Further, if there's a surplus where our revenues exceed our expenses, these amounts must be transferred to reserves to bring the budget and our operations again to zero. So all these items, as well as our operating deficit, is what drove the 7% increase.
Discussion, questions, Your Worship.
So down the road, as we get more development, particularly north of 7, we're going to need another water tower. Does the financing for that come up partly out of the water and sewer reserve?
So I think through the chair, water and sewer amounts, yes, anything that's related to water and sewer would come out of the water and sewer reserves. I think that water tower in general, I wouldn't know if there's any other development charges or anything else that would also go through that as well, or any other grants that we could receive for that as well.
So this illustrates my point that yes, we're doing the budget for this year, but I think we have to consider what is coming before future councils in terms of expenses, and it's better to at least partially provide for some of those expenses in this year's budget as opposed to dumping it on them.
I agree. Like that's what the capital levy is for. So like I said, the water and sewer reserve, so anything that has for the water increase is generally there so that you can put more money into your reserve so that it can pay for itself moving forward. So that was the intent behind the 6% water increase.
Councillor McCray.
Through you, Chair. If we could refer to slide number 46. In the first statement, it says, if there is a surplus, revenues exceed expenses, the excess amount are moved into reserves. Are we anticipating any movement from our 2025 budget into reserves at this point in time, or what do we, where are we?
So through the chair, when we get to the reserve amounts, you'll see what is expected for 2025. That will be our starting point based on this budget, where I think we'll end up at the end of 2026. So I think when we come up to different, and actually in the next section, we talk about different capital projects, it will be really transparent and something that we'll have to watch throughout the year next year just to see, because I know projects do come up that are not within the budget that then need to use our reserve. So those can change from any projection that you're having at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Bolt.
Thank you, Chair. So Nev, you can answer this now, or you can answer it when we get down the line here. But again, I'm stuck on this water and sewer thing. So if we go back to the comment here that the expected surplus from water and sewer charges this year is 1.718 million. So that means there's going to be a positive injection to the surplus for water and sewer, correct? So when I flip ahead, and I'm not trying to flip ahead here, but I did, there's a comment here for reserve balances, and it says water and sewer reserves projected to decline to 3.5 million. Can you explain to me if we're putting 1.7 in, but we're going to decline to 3.5, where's the difference?
Sure, through the chair, actually the next section is talking about capital projects. And so there are a lot of water infrastructure projects that will be happening in the next year. So that will offset. So instead of taking out reserves and then replenishing it with your surplus, it will just use whatever surplus that you made with that water and sewer amounts for this year, so that it actually will be offset by $400,000. That's what that means.
Clear as mud. Okay.
We'll go through it in the next section.
In essence, we're spending that money on projects and infrastructure. So we're adding some to the bank account at the beginning of the year, but then we're drawing down to pay for things. So that's where the decline happens.
A question, and I'm prepared to tell, no, I've got this wrong, but in practical terms, in experience, this year we had 2 water main breaks. One was paid for out of budgeting for that department, expecting that there might be that. The second, I believe, came out of reserves. And if we'd had a third, that would either have come out of reserves or we'd have to fund it some other way. Is that fair?
Through the chair, that's fair. Yep.
Thank you. Now a question for council. I'm going to suggest that we take a personal break for 10 minutes. Then there is a cold lunch, and I don't know if council want to do what we did last year, is take that 10-minute break, personal break, and then almost work through a lunch in here. If people are agreeable to that. I'll take that as a yes. So I'll call the 10-minute break now at 11:24. The meeting is back in order at 11:45, and I'd like the director to continue, please.
Perfect. Okay, so this section about capital projects is really an overview of what we had spoken about earlier this year in terms of our capital asset management plan and how it is really a living document and how we're reviewing it on an annual basis just to ensure that we are completing critical infrastructure and taking a look at what needs to be done and when it needs to be done. For 2026 in particular, the capital projects total about $3.7 million, which includes roads, water, storm, and bridge rehabilitation. Carry forward projects from 2025 will add another $4 million. What's not included in this amount are the amounts that would be for the ES garage. I thought at the point when I know we right now are going to tender, and I would bring forward a presentation at the time when the tenders have come in, when we have our final year-end reserve amounts to provide a better picture of the debt amounts that would be required and the foundation of what it would look like for the municipality at that time. So the following slides outline the actual capital projects projected for 2026. They include land improvements to the Tay Basin and fencing, work on buildings at the water treatment plant, replacement of vehicles and equipment, digitizing our documents, and work on Robinson Street and the corresponding infrastructure under the roadway for sanitary, water, and storm infrastructure. The project descriptions are really codes for the ES department to be able to determine which segments of road and infrastructure to work on, just in case anyone was trying to decipher what they mean. And finally, there is work to be completed on the Little Tay and Rainbow Bridge as well during the year.
Sorry, I was just catching up myself there. Councillor Oldfield.
Thank you, Chair. Looking at the page that says Asset Management Plan Outlook, I note in 2030 and 2034, there's a substantial increase in terms of cost. Any comments on how we're going to pay for that in those years? Because they're quite astronomical in terms of what I see in front of me.
Yeah, so through the chair, as we discussed earlier, I believe this month, it was kind of looking at those 2 years had a few things in there. So I think there was fire truck renewals, there was the pool, there was some road segments that we would just do paving on, which was about $3 million. So what I'm hoping about in those amounts, when we talk about reserves, that will be in there in regards to debt. But what my hope is that with the capital levy and increasing our capital levy every year and having a capital levy every year, that it will reduce the amount of debt that we will need and that we'd be able to pay for that infrastructure.
Thank you. Something to keep an eye on. I have another question, if I may, Chair.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. You mentioned the Works Garage, and you'll be doing a presentation a little bit down the road with regards to that. However, we will be incurring debt with regards to the garage. So if you're not presenting this to us until, I'm asking January, February, is that correct?
So through the chair, I was hoping to wait till we actually get to the tender amounts, because what I've seen since I've been here is that sometimes the tender amounts come really under from what we were expecting. So that would really change the financial forecast moving forward, which is why I wanted to wait till the tender amounts came in.
If I may, Chair. So therefore, if we pass this budget or whatever budget we pass, we're passing it not knowing the debt that will be further incurred in 2026 because of the potential more debt with regards to the garage.
So through the chair, that's correct. So even if it was done with total debt, your reserves wouldn't change. So that to me, with looking at this budget, is looking at where our reserves are going to be in at the end of 2026. So with the Works Garage, let's say we paid for it and we didn't get any grants and it was fully debt, then really that's the difference, is that your debt amount, which where we go to our reserve outlook, is that the debt max that we would reach would be earlier than what is projected it to be.
So am I hearing that we will be using some reserve to pay for the garage, not financing it fully from debt with regards to the grants we don't get?
So through the chair, it would be funded through debt at this point, unless there was an influx of reserves and we decided to put a portion of the reserves towards that. But a significant amount at this point where we are would be fully debt.
So if we have what would be the maximum amount that we would go into debt, worst case scenario, because of the garage? And how would that affect our ARL?
I think through the chair, at this point, I'm just using speculations from what was done in previous years of the total dollar value that was for the ES garage, and I believe that was $4 million.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Bolt.
So through the chair, along those same lines then, there's a comment in here that based on our current projections for borrowing, we're going to hit our maximum, our annual, like our maximum borrowing capacity by 2031. That's only 5 years from now. 5 to 6 years from now. If this $4 million has to be financed, that's going to bring us back even closer. Instead of 2031, we're going to be at our maximum in, say, 2030.
Right.
So that, for me, is a concern. In that vein, under your 2026 capital projects, you show a 2005 hoist for the fleet shop. Is that the same shop that we're talking about replacing, or is that somewhere else? Fleet
So-
shop hoist, $22,000. Is that the same building? Is that a different building?
Through the chair, that's a piece of equipment being replaced in the existing shop and transferred to the new shop.
Oh, there, you just answered my question. I was going to say, why buy a new hoist if we're going to build a new building? So, okay, question answered.
So I don't know if you want me to comment on that. So through the chair, yeah, so our reserves, as we go into the next section, you will see it's actually 2033, but you're absolutely right that it will just bring our 2033 number closer than it is. And I think that's why it's very critical for our discussions today to discuss about, if we'd reduce that levy, that's reducing our reserves. If we do not have the capital levy, that's going to reduce our reserves. So all of these things have an impact on future years. And that's why I really tried to present something that was reasonable for everything here that would also make it financially sustainable in the future.
Go ahead.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, if I could just then, on that comment, if I could make this comment. With respect to that 1% levy, I get it. We're trying to replace reserves. I mean, the town at one point was up to its maximum limit before my time, and then we got it down, and then we had some nice reserves. Now we're going the other way. 1% is only $100,000 a year. It's going to take 10 years to get $1 million. We're talking about far more than $1 million based on where we're going with debt projections. So as much as I don't agree with the capital levy, because I just think our taxes are out of control here. I see where you're going, but I to say that 1% is for future. Yeah, it's for future, but is it enough? I mean, yeah, I just said that. Is it enough?
Yeah. So through the chair, sorry, I agree with everything that you're saying here. I really tried to prepare a budget with everything that I've heard over the last 7 months of me being here in regards to what we need to maintain our service levels, affordability in regards to our residents. So I thought this was the balanced approach. I agree that I would love to have a capital budget of way more and put way more aside. But I think when we take into account, and I know a concern of all of you is what our residents are paying now and what they can pay, that I thought that was at least the amount. Like I said, I didn't come here with amounts in my head that I knew I could cut to get to a point where I could come. I'm coming to you with like the bare minimum of what I think is required at this point.
Councillor McCray and then Councillor Waterfield.
So just 2 points. With a 6% increase in taxes, we're just treading water. With a 7%, we might be lucky to slide out of the pool. Seriously, that's where we're at. And I get it exactly what you've tried to do. What I would like to do now is I'd like to look at those capital projects, the streets in specific. And my question to environmental services is, if we do not do these streets, are we going to find ourselves in situations of safety concerns and liability? Are there any of those streets that we can wait on?
So, Through the chair, and I will let Grant discuss anything he needs to, but what we did in the summer is we actually took a very deep dive into the asset management plan, and Grant's department especially had to go through each and every road, all the segments underneath, and really discuss, one, when they had to be done. But what ended up happening is if you just move them all to when they had to be done, you're going to have more years that look at like 2031 and 2035 with these astronomical amounts. So what we tried to do is like, okay, let's spread it out. So let's do one road this year. We know that there's going to be Highway 7 coming up, so that's going to be another influx. So we won't do anything that year. So it was kind of a balancing act of not having so many projects in 1 year of when it would be critical, but to try to split that out. I don't know if there was anything else. Okay.
And just one other question. Those estimated costs, are they projected high? Because we know that every time we anticipate a cost, it just skyrockets. So when you projected those estimated costs,
Yeah, so through the chair, they are using that building construction price index that we talked about, using inflationary periods as well. And what we've done this year as well is, Grant and his team and I have worked together to be like, okay, what are the projections that are coming? What are actual tenders? Why are they off? Like why is our projection off, or is it under, so that we can make these more reasonable and more in line to what is actually going to be spent.
Thank you.
Councillor Waterfield.
Through the chair, just getting back to the garage again. From the best practices point of view, is it acceptable and normal to be asked to pass a budget knowing that we have a question mark around a major debt for next year? So we're being asked to potentially pass a budget today for our financials operations next year. But what I'm hearing is, okay, this is the proposal. And oh, by the way, with regards to the garage, there'll be a presentation early in the first quarter. We will be incurring more debt, but there's a question mark around that. As a counselor, to be honest, I'm not comfortable with that because I'm being asked to pass a budget without full information. And we're talking about significant amount of money here in terms of the differentiation of what we may or may not get in grants for this particular project. So I appreciate if you could help me out on this because I'm having some difficulty here.
No, for sure. So through the chair, the reason why the garage was not included in this year's budget is that I understood from the last year's budget that it was included and then requested that it be removed and included and discussed at a different date. So based on that information, I kind of followed suit on that same amount to have it go forward in that same way, just as Kathy came forward in regards to just going to tender. The assumption at that time was that we would have a discussion once the tenders came in on what we were going to do for the ES garage. I don't know if you want to add more to
Yeah,
it.
so through the chair, because Nev wasn't here at the last budget cycle, staff did present the garage as part of the budget process last year. The council said, no, take it out. We'll make a decision at whatever point you bring it back throughout the year. So we've just been following that direction and took that same approach in this year's budget. If council would like to add it in, we were happy to add it into this year's budget at this stage. But that was council's direction last budget process, so we've been carrying on with that.
At that point, I'm just going to say as chair, can we have a focused discussion on that issue that's just been raised by the CAO? Councillor Bolt.
Well, here again, we're talking about potentially up to a $4 million expenditure. We've all talked about it before. We know it's coming. We know we need, we talked about, do we do a Band-Aid on what we have and fix up what we can and continue to pay $50,000 a year for a trailer? Or do we bite the bullet and put up a new Yardworks garage? I think we all would agree that we need a new garage. But again, if you add $4 million into this year's budget, just today, the reality is then you're going to have a lot more than a 7% increase, unless you're going to fund all of it. And you've indicated that we're going to borrow it. So once again, as we just talked about a few minutes ago, we're going to hit the wall financially in our borrowing capacity a lot sooner than what's even being projected now. So that's a reality, folks, and we're all going to have to come to grips with that. And when we get to that point, what happens then?
Deputy Mayor.
So if the tenders come back in February, March, whenever we're thinking they're gonna come back, and council has to agree, so it's probably a month delay. If they come back in February, we're not gonna make a decision till March or April. And then when they start construction, it's gonna take more than a year to build this building. So when do you have to borrow the money to pay for the cost for the building? Can you borrow the money in 2027? Like, is there any way, and I'm not trying to duck out of it, but I mean, when is the time that you have to actually borrow the money to construct the new garage? Because it's not operational until 2027, 2028 anyway.
Right, so through the chair, that's why it would be beneficial to kind of have a conversation when the tenders come in. So depending on when the tenders come in, depending on the amount that they come in as, that's going to determine how much we actually need to borrow. Borrowing can happen at any point. So at that point, based on where our reserves are at, we would have to take a look at, can we kind of fund it through the rest of 2026 and get the borrowing for 2027 to hit? Or are we just going to need to borrow before the project starts, so before we hit the ground, so we have the funds to be able to pay for it? So I will say, like for Craig Street, for example, majority of the work was done before we got the financing for it, right? So it all depends on timing and where we are at in our reserves, like whether we can actually pay for it or not. So that's where I wanted to have a kind of a more conversation, because I think it is such a large amount. So we're saying $4 million. But, you know, if it came back like Craig Street, where it was a couple $1 million less, that's a very different picture that we're looking at. So to make a decision on a number where we aren't really sure where that's going to sit and where our reserves are actually going to be at that point, I think at the same time, like everything else is in the budget, it is just really an estimate at this point. But I know, as Michael had said before, that this was something that, you know, was taken out of last year's budget. And I think for those facts alone, it is a one-time large project for the municipality. So I don't know if that answers your question.
So I guess what I'm asking again, maybe is, so the tax implication isn't going to really hit us this year. If we set a 6% tax increase, borrowing the money is really going to be in a 2027 tax year. Right? Like you can't come back to me anyway in July and say, by the way, we're going to raise taxes 3% more because we borrowed $2.5–3 million. It's really it doesn't really matter, actually, is what I'm trying to say, correct? In the whole scheme of the big picture, we're going to pay net this year, we're going to pay next year. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah, so through the chair, especially if you're using debt to finance the whole thing, it's really just not, it's not an implication really, other than the debt repayments that we would have to do every year. So depending on the debt repayment, that kind of goes into the calculation for the levy. Other than that, there is no other amount that would be attributed to that other than the actual operations of the garage, right? Which hopefully would decrease in some way, like you said, about the rental of the $50,000 that we're spending right now. So I just think to have a picture of what that all looks like, it right now, I wouldn't know, just it's all speculation based on what I've had in the last budget.
Councillor McRae.
So through you, Chair Tanev, what we're doing here is we're talking about provisions. Okay, we're talking about, just as our deputy mayor has alluded to, the more accurate the numbers are moving forward into the next year, the better we are in a position to deal with it. Right now, it's like, you know, a moving target. We have no idea. So I think we just, you know, as suggested by the deputy mayor, we move things along with the budget this year, and that we need, the reality is we look at that point in time.
Okay, I did ask for a focused discussion on this. If you want to add something in your worship, but I just want to say that once this bit is over, what I'm looking for is not necessarily a motion, unless that clerk tells me that's required. Indication of council that we're satisfied to follow what has been discussed, that this will come up next year when we know what the numbers are. And but we're fully aware that this is something looming on the horizon, but it's not I want to know really direction wise whether it's going to be included in this budget or we wait to see what the numbers are.
So $4 million or whatever it might be is a mind-boggling figure. Ultimately, because there's only one taxpayer, the taxpayer is going to pay for it. Have you done a calculation on if, that's just as an example, if we borrowed $4 million over 15 years at 3%, what would the cost be per year, and how much money that would translate to on the tax bill? It puts it in a little bit more better proportion.
Yeah, so through the chair, when we did the asset management plan, there is a 10-year financial outlook. And so that would include any borrowing that we have and what the potential repayments would be and the interest payments would be on that. So it would be easy for me to add, and when we go through the reserve slides following, you'll see an amount that says debt. And so that amount would just add another $4 million to it, right, for this budget. And the only difference would be, depending on when we had the debt, you might have a portion of debt repayment for this year. So, you know, if we had it in January, then yes, you would have a payment. But if we don't actually get the debt until later in the year, the actual debt repayments wouldn't hit until 2027, and it would be included in that budget and would be included in that levy.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Council. At this point, I'm going to ask if there is anybody that wants to make a motion to put the garage expense into this budget. So if we have that motion, and then we'll have further discussion and I'll call the question. Just check Zoom and there doesn't appear to be anybody. So we'll move on after. I just want to make the observation that I noticed when I looked at the projections for the asset management and also from conversation on timelines in relation to debt, to sort of focus the mind a bit. Your graph, for example, shows the remainder of this term of council and the next 2 terms of council to get some kind of focus on timelines on that in reality. Councillor Bolt.
So this is an asset management question then, and I brought it up a few times. And the question is about the White House and the sale of the White House. I'm sitting here thinking, where can we find money to help offset some of these expenses? And we've discussed the White House a few times. My question is it feasible to believe that we'll be able to get the White House ready for sale and sold in 2026 to help offset some of these expenses?
Through the chair, yes, it is. We had to go, because it's currently sits on part of the larger park property, we had to determine minimum sizes for what we could sever that property off for. So that's been done by Joanna and Noah. So we have a surveyor out there right now doing we're legally describing that property line. So we should be able to put it up for sale in December, January.
So as a follow-up, if I may, then we don't know what it's going to sell for until we test the market, but then that money would, I'm assuming, just go straight into reserves, correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
Thank you.
Anything further? Deputy Mayor.
Can you explain to me the Crystal Palace parking lot project? I don't know what it is. $450,000. What are we doing? That's in 2026.
The Tay Basin parking
Oh,
lot.
476.
Speak to that if you don't mind. Sorry.
Yeah, through the chair, this is obviously an asset identified in the asset management plan. So it's a reinvestment in redoing the whole structure. So looking at the curbing, the drainage, the asphalt surface, all those components. So it's like any other asset. Its time has come to the end of life, so it's time to reinvest.
Okay, so
Sorry, and just before you further that, also this, if council recall back in August, Toby Shannon came to discuss the Red House project. So this would incorporate that as well. We're also aware that there's a parking shortage in downtown, and that's been discussed at this table many times. So Grant and I have already discussed that there's a lot of space in that area that we could potentially add some parking to address some of those issues. So the project would encompass all those things.
I totally agree with you. It is probably the worst designed parking lot in the history of the world. But having said that, if council said no, okay, I know this is a Toby Shannon issue about what he wants to accomplish. If council said no, it's an ugly parking lot. It was never designed properly, but it's not falling apart. I know in your world, Grant, you know a lot more about the structures than I do, but as a citizen, and I'm trying to find money to save citizens money on, is it a do and die thing I have to do because of the structure? Or is it a what's the percentages of we have to do structural work to the parking lot versus we'd really like to make it a much better parking lot than what it is, but if council said no, we could live with what it is. Because I'm trying to find. So I've had the discussion about this parking lot with people, and people said, "What are you doing? It's an ugly parking lot. It's terrible. But if you're trying to keep my taxes down, don't do it unless you actually it has to be done." So that's my question, I guess.
Through the chair, as far as a risk assessment, nobody's going to get ill or injured from the parking lot in general. But it is an asset, and by not doing the work doesn't mean it goes away. It's just pushing it to the next level. Kathy and I are working with a landscape architect group that's possibly looking at a project on there. So probably optimizing. So we're going to be looking at the terms of reference as far as optimizing parking, reducing parking, finding a better balance of greenery, making it more inviting, making turning movements and throughput better. So those are all components that we will consider when we do it, I guess, if we do it. But by not doing it in 26 doesn't mean it just goes away.
Sorry, and I was wondering if I could just add to that too. So because this is part of the capital projects, it really doesn't have the same direct impact that an operating expense would have on the tax levy. So the reason why capital projects are there and we talk about our reserves is that because from the operating expenses and revenues, whatever comes out of that, like whatever excess we have, that would go into our reserves that would help to pay for these projects. So when you're looking at reducing the tax levy, if you took out one of these projects, really what you would still want that tax levy to be the same because it's the reserve amount that you want from this year's operations to go into your capital amount either way. So even if you decrease this 400,000 amount, yes, it's less capital projects. So you would actually keep more in your reserves because you're not using it, but at another date, you're likely going to use it again. So I just wanted to make sure that that correlation's not there. It's not the same as saying taking out $100,000 in our operating expenses is not the same as taking it out from the capital. I don't know if that makes sense, but yeah.
Yeah, it does to me, but at the end of the day, I'm not asking taxpayers for another $400,000 to put in reserves or something else. So at the end of the day, I gotta come up with this money. So, and I don't have any issue, and I get the fact, don't push stuff off, but people are having a really hard time. I mean, I've got family members who can't afford to live in this town right now. And I've got friends who are telling me they can't afford to live in this town. And we're paying for a lot of problems that we're created in the fact we don't have growth and we don't have a lot of stuff that everybody else has, but people are really having a hard time. And what I'll say is I'm a homeowner and I also have rental properties and I'm retired. And we've had this chat. But once you're retired, you lose every year. You never get ahead because taxes go up, your pension income doesn't go up. That's life. You guys don't get a pay raise every year to cover off the costs of how much the town's going up. But people are having a really hard time. The table's talking about it. The food banks are overwhelmed everywhere. And we all go to Roma, we go to AMO, we go to all these conferences. The number one problem is asset management, right? We paid 10 cents on the dollar in the 50s and 60s, and now we're paying 90 cents on the dollar. So, but a small town with basically no growth at the current time, the people are having a real hard time. The landlords can't increase their rents to cover off the costs that they're facing to maintain their properties. I'm not necessarily sure if tenants understand the pressures on homeowners and landlords. And really the tax increases really hurt the homeowners versus the tenants, because the tenants are basically protected in Ontario right now. So while I agree it's a terrible parking lot, it was the wildest thing we ever built in this town. $400,000 is $400,000. And if I could use the $400,000 for a project that needs to be done, I'll never say no to roads. But if it's a project that is nice to have, I think we're kind of in this world now where people are going, I'd love to do stuff, but I can't do the roof and the windows at the same time. And if it's a $400,000 savings that I don't have to hit people for right now, and down the road we'll figure out something to do with it if it really needs to be done, that's fine. But it is $400,000 of taxpayers' money, even if it just goes in reserves or whatever. So I am looking to try and find some savings. That's just the fact of life where we are today.
So I'm gonna, if I may, ask a question. No, I'll wait. It was Councillor McRae, Councillor Waterfield, and then Councillor Bolt.
So,
As you're
so,
both.
so through you, Chair, to the Deputy Mayor, I just want to make sure I'm clear on understanding him fully. Am I hearing you say that with the $400,000 that we could potentially save by not doing that part of the asset management, we would then decrease the tax levy? Or are you saying we would take that $400,000 and use it for other projects? I just need clarification on that.
Yeah, I'm saying that if there's $400,000 of work that needs to be done somewhere in asset management, other sidewalk, street, that's totally fine. But what I'm saying is if there's projects we're doing that are not necessarily need to be done for safety's sake,
Right.
I don't necessarily want to do them. I mean, in a perfect world, I would have rebuilt that thing 20 years ago, but we're not in a perfect world.
And just one other,
Bob?
one other added question, if I might. Do we have any idea if we did spend that 400,000, the type of money we might be able to generate through increased parking spaces, okay, or more effective parking spaces? And also, do we have tabs on the amount of money that is generated? And maybe the BIA could help us with that, or the Chamber of Commerce, through the events that are centered around the Crystal Palace, because that in itself is an economic driver in this community. That building is used by an awful lot of different groups, and they are needing parking. And so those are just some things to take into consideration. I'm all for trying to, I asked that question about the asset management. I asked that, are there any ways that we could, are those things necessary that we have to do? But those are just some things to consider before we make a decision to just cut that project.
Thank you. Councillor Waterfield.
Thank you, Chair. With regards to this issue around the parking lot of the Crystal Palace, increasingly the Crystal Palace itself and that whole area is really becoming a focal point with regards to our community life downtown. We have a staff report that's coming up with regards to the recommendation by Toby Shannon to move the Red House there. We do have other stakeholders that border that property, such as the Studio Theater, not to mention getting input from the BIA. I think there needs to be a real rethink with regards to getting input from stakeholders as to how we vision this central space in our downtown for the benefit of our community. To me, it's a lot more than simply redoing the parking lot. So I would certainly entertain a motion or a thought in terms of holding off on the recommended repairs to the parking lot and having a rethink as to how we approach this, because I think we're we're opening up an opportunity here to say, hey, we value our downtown. We want to use our infrastructure and our spaces to maximize the building of community. And by getting very process-oriented input from stakeholders, I think we could create a very exciting vision for our downtown with that space being a focal point. So I would like to see, and I'll be prepared to make a motion to take that off of this year's budget, relook at it again, perhaps for next year. But in the meantime, I will bring forth discussion with regards to any proper input from stakeholders, visioning the future of the central area in downtown.
Okay, I know that Councillor Bold is waiting to speak and the mayor on the ongoing issue, but I think we have a motion on the floor at this point. Is that correct?
I will be glad to make the motion that we withdraw the repaving of the Crystal Palace parking lot for the upcoming budget year.
Do you wish to add anything in relation to what you said further about a review, pending a review of that space?
I'll
The use
be
of that
glad
space?
to add, pending a review of the wording myself and the clerk could discuss, but getting input from stakeholders, the BIA, the studio theater and so forth, really creating a vision for that area of our downtown to become a focal point of community building. And as a result of that, probably including Toby Shannon's suggestion. And then once we have the vision, we've got the input, let's create a space there that can really enhance the community life of our town.
Thank you. I'm going to ask the clerk to write, she's been busily typing, and put the wording on the floor, and then we'll discuss the motion.
Sorry, so while Amanda's doing that. Sorry, Barry's mic keeps feeding back. Just for context, Grant did mention the landscape architect that we have engaged. That was a pro bono thing that a local architect has arranged with a university where their students or a class that's happening. I think starting in January was going to come in and do exactly what Councillor Waterfield was suggesting and do a design for that parking lot with the anticipation that we were redoing the parking lot. So they were going to meet with the stakeholders that Councillor Waterfield mentioned and look at optimizing that at no cost to the town. So just for context for your motion.
If I may, Chair, thank you, because I was not aware of that specific detail. And with what you've shared with me, it kind of mirrors the motion that I just put on the floor. So will there be I'd like more information with regards to that, and what's the feedback mechanism to council?
Yeah, so it was just something that happened in the last couple of weeks where that an architect that was working with Toby Shannon on the Red House approached us and asked if we'd be interested in having this university class do or run this design as their project for this particular course. So we said yes, we'd be interested in that because there's no cost to us, and it fit nicely with us redoing the parking lot. So once that's engaged, the class starts in January. So then we'd be coming to, I made it clear that they would come to council at various points to get input and also to present recommendations.
Yeah, if I may, can I just have the clerk read out the motion as she has it before we have further discussion?
So drafted through the chair, as recommended by the Committee of the Whole, be it resolved that the Council of the Town of Perth remove the associated costs for the recommended repairs to the Tay Basin parking lot, pending the review of input from stakeholders and a subsequent staff report is provided.
Councillor Waterfield?
Chair, if I just may speak to the motion I've mentioned, I think the motion is still relevant even in view of what the CAO has shared with us, because that really is the action part of my motion, in that there will be this pro bono work, getting input from stakeholders downtown, and that will be brought back to us. Meanwhile, we're holding off on redoing the parking lot, and based upon the input that we get as a result of that study, then we can make a decision with the information that we have. To have this taking place and then in our budget repaving the parking lot, to me, doesn't make sense. So my motion still stands. I await for the feedback from this study. I'm looking forward to input from all stakeholders downtown. As a result of that, then we could look at what we want to do going forward with regards to the parking lot. But I'm thinking more of it, I'm thinking of this space being more than a parking lot. I really have a vision of this being a center of community building in our downtown.
Thank you. So the motion is on the floor. Can I have any questions or discussion in relation to that? Councillor McCray and then the Deputy Mayor.
Through you, Chair, to our CAO, Michael Tao. In the discussions that we've had going forward with Toby Shannon, are there any timelines that would impede this motion that Council Waterfield has brought forward?
Through the chair, we don't have firm timelines yet from Toby on the Red House, whether it's 26 or 27, that both probably would work, but.
Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, so I appreciate Nev's comment. So I don't see it having an effect on the levy this year. So I don't want to tie the hands of staff. I appreciate what you said too, Ann. I don't want to tie the hands of staff and delay it for a whole year on all the background work that's going on. So I won't support your motion, Gary, just because I think we have to say we are in favor of doing it. Just how am I going to afford to pay for this? And that's going to be worked out. So.
Your Worship.
I appreciate what you said about how people are having a hard time. Councillor McCray was telling me that the usage of the food bank is like 100 people a day. But that's not going to change between this year and next year. What we're doing here is trying to drop stuff from the budget that we're only going to have to pay, or whoever the council of the day is, pay in their budget next year. And I think that's a mistake. I won't support your motion for that reason. And also, the way I recall Toby Shannon describing this project with the Red House is simply that project. People will come to watch it and they will bring money to town. So it's not an outlay of money that's revenue neutral. It will bring money into town. So again, I will not support the motion to withdraw it.
Okay, I think it's incumbent on me to try and sort out what's happened here. We had this whole issue raised by the Deputy Mayor, and he has now clarified that his concern was how do we pay for that? To be fair to the motion on the floor, the conversation has evolved into if we leave it in the budget and we do work there that we then have to either undo or do further work. Is that fair? Is that where you're coming from, Councillor Waterfield?
That's fair.
So that's two related issues, but not the same issue. So if I can call the question, please, now on this removal of this line item, unless you have, Deputy Mayor.
Are you guys going to build it this year? Is the plan to do it this year? Like we're talking about all this review, talking with all the neighbors, talking to all the different interested groups. Was your plan to have it done this year? Or is this for the parking lot? Like what is the timeline to complete the whole project? I guess this.
Well, grants coming up, the time, yeah, you can still speak to the timeline of the actual project. The timeline for the landscape architect stuff and the review of that will all be within the one university semester. So from January to April. So all that consultation and recommendations and a plan coming to council will be in that window.
Through the chair, the basis of the asset management plan is to replace like with like. So what Michael just said is if there's a minor change, that's above what we're projecting to do. So we'll include that. I'm pretty confident in the numbers that we have, that we can include those changes within the budget amount. But going back to replace like with like, we're not redesigning completely and throwing a bomb in there. We're resurfacing, repairing, doing that. So anything in addition to that will be bringing forth to council.
So Grant, so what I'm asking is when you go out for tenders, can you do it this year? Do you expect to get the tenders back and you can do the work you want to do this year?
Through the chair, yeah, I believe we can.
Okay, are you going to be taking out the grassy, the trees in the middle, or like, so this is what I'm kind of just wondering, like, is this all going to be done this year? Like, you just finished saying that you may get an architect plan here that landscape architect is gonna throw maybe a bit of a wrench into it. Like you're talking like for like now, but now we're also talking, we may take islands out and stuff. So what I'm just sort of saying is, do you think you can have all the consultation done, the tenders out, and the work completed before the end of this year? And I don't know how you know that if you don't know what's going on here.
My short answer is it's, yes, we are. As a footprint, it's relatively large, but it's not a complicated build. There's not water and sewer that we have to do. There's no environmental assessment. We have to do things like that. It's kind of amending and moving concrete infrastructure and repaving. We're not building something new. It's essentially repairing and optimizing it.
And I think we're back to the nub of this issue that's now before us, is that we pay for work that eventually may have to be extra work. So my understanding to the director, just for clarification for myself and for council, is that if we take this line item out, can't be any tenders going out, correct?
Correct. So through the chair, I just wanted to clarify that. If we take this out of the capital project, when we go into the next section, which is reserves, that's where you're going to see the impact, is our reserves will go up an extra $400,000 because we're not doing that capital project this year. That's the change that you're going to see.
Sir, and I would just caution, or not caution, it's your decision, remind council too that if we're delaying it too much, then we're also pushing into the Highway 7 project and the Gore Street rebuild, which compresses a whole bunch of projects potentially together, potentially straining financial and human resources capital.
Can I just give Councillor Waterfield a chance to speak to his motion and then the Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Chair. In view of the discussion, I'm prepared to withdraw the motion and have that line item within the budget, providing, and if it requires a motion, the clerk can counsel me on this, providing that this does not start until we get the report from the consulting company. And once we get the report from them and we get the information with regards to input from stakeholders and so on and so forth, then we decide in terms of action steps. And as insurance, we have money in the budget. I think that's a prudent way to go ahead. But I don't want this to begin prior to getting the results of that study.
Then as chair, my question would be to the clerk and to the CAO. Can that be dealt with as a direction by council to staff to do it that chronological order?
Through the chair, yes, that only makes sense that we would wait until the design was done before just going in there and repaving.
Do you wish to withdraw the motion?
So Chair, I wish to withdraw the motion, but I'm asking the clerk, does it require a motion in terms of my desire to ensure that the work does not begin until we get the report with regards to the future of that space in town?
So through the chair, and the CAO and treasurer can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the procurement policy would require, due to the financial impact of this project, that prior to the project being approved to go ahead, that it would be required to come back to council for approval.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead, yes.
My last question is, so are we leaving the 400,000 in the budget, or are we taking it out?
If Councillor Waterfield has actually withdrawn his motion, so at that point it remains inside.
Okay. Just want to make sure.
Councillor Bolt.
So we don't have to vote on that, am I correct?
Correct.
So I had a grant question.
Yes, I'm back into the proper order now.
Okay, so it's again to do with 2026 capital projects. I see we have to replace an aged cube van. And I'm wondering why we have to replace a cube van for more than $250,000. What's special about this cube van? Is there any way we can save some money this time around in this procurement?
Through the chair, I just would reiterate that this is not my estimate that I've gone to market for to get the pricing on this particular cube van. This is an asset that's accrued in value, and this is what its new replacement value is. So from that process, I will be speccing a particular vehicle. And as we always do, we optimize what the design is, what's in and what's out. And in this case, there's some components that will be harvested from the existing, the compressor, the generator, that'll be transferred over. But the asset is listed as that, as it's accrued in value over time.
Thank you for the clarification.
Thank you. Before we took the detail for the motion, your worship.
Comment. As Nev has told us, staff has gone through the asset management plan, got costs that are, you know, as accurate as possible, analyzed the necessity of doing whatever item this year. So I don't think it's productive to look at individual items at this point of the game, and unless there's some spectacular reason taking them out, I trust staff judgment. That's what we pay them for.
Okay, I think we're now ready to move on to the next section. Please, Director Jandy.
Perfect. Thank you. So based on the information that's provided in this budget, our capital reserves will increase by $400,000 due to the borrowing and new capital levy. Our water and sewer reserves are expected to slightly decrease by around $300,000 based on new capital projects that we just discussed being completed during the year. As we've discussed in previous meetings and you've all heard before, we are expecting to continue to have drawdowns on our reserves unless they are offset by rate increases, capital levies, or service adjustments. So this slide just shows the math behind the information. So when we were talking about the ES garage or taking anything out, what you would notice the differences is in that column that says additional debt financing. That would either just go up and that would adjust your balance at the end of the year. Or under that operations amount, if you took out the 400,000, that's where it would adjust. So really it would just adjust your ending reserve amount at the end of the year. So when we talk about our reserves and how to be financially stable, we need to talk about our debt and using it strategically over a means to keep our reserves at an acceptable level. As we discussed in the summer, even with including our 2026 debt repayments, HERS still remains conservative at 25% of our annual repayment limit, leaving flexibility for future years. Using our debt strategically would mean using our debt capacity, not fully, but to a 50 to 60% range to ensure that we still kept debt aside for emergencies, ensuring that our creditworthiness remains strong, and to ensure that we don't expose ourselves to risks associated with interest rate changes. So based on this information, this chart shows the max amount of debt that we could potentially take. But based on that 50 to 60% amount, we would really want to only have a max around $20 million in debt. So when we take a look at our reserve balances with a requirement of debt to keep the balances at a reasonable amount, this is what it would look like for capital. And then for water and sewer. However, when we look at the reserves and then apply our debt limit, you will see that we are actually at a borrowing capacity and reserves by 2033. This chart also doesn't take into account the conservative approach of $20 million. It's actually when we are at our max. So the need to ensure that we are replenishing our reserves with funding, not just from debt, is critical. Further, with new revenue streams and revenue generation, it will correlate with a higher annual repayment limit, which will keep moving our date of reaching our max debt capacity to future years. I also just wanted to speak to it here that using debt strategically is really not using debt so that we can keep our reserves at a certain level, right? Like I think even personally, you wouldn't take out money from your credit card to be able to replenish your bank account, right? That is not really what we're in the best case scenario, we'd be using debt when interest rates were low and it was better for us to invest the money that we had in our reserves and take out debt to be able to pay for our capital projects. Right now, we're actually using our debt to make sure that our reserves stay in a level where they're acceptable, so that in case we did have emergencies or anything did happen, that we would have an amount there to sustain it.
Questions? Councillor Bolt.
Okay, so I know you don't have a crystal ball, but based on the reports that we keep getting from our planning department on the number of projects that are in the queue and in various phases of development, some started, some about to start, and so on. I sit here and I look into the future and say, okay, if these all go ahead as planned, we're going to have significantly more units in the town, which are going to generate more taxation. But when you build a new property, then you have to service it. And I get that they have to pay for a certain portion of the servicing. But people keep saying to me as a councillor, we got to get this town going. We got to get some projects developed and get them going here so we can get more tax base in. My question is, if we went up 1,500 units this year in the next, let's say in 2026, the revenue that generates in more taxation, is that more or less used up? Is it balanced out by the cost of servicing it, or is there a surplus that will come back to the town from those new units? And if so, any idea how much that would be?
So through the chair, I don't have a crystal ball.
I knew.
But what I can say is that with increased population and increased taxpayer, it would lessen the burden for the rest of it. Would even it out and provide some relief for a tax basis. Whether it would pay for its own infrastructure or we get a surplus, the hope is that it would provide more of a surplus to bring down your levy. At this point, it all depends on the number of services, what needs to be done, what the developer's paying for, what the town would be paying for. All of those amounts would have to be taken into consideration. And that's why when we talk about, I believe it was one of the budget objectives was to look at the demographic change and the rising population. That's when we have to really look at it. What is what does it mean to really maintain our current service level with the increasing population?
Right.
Can we do it with just a slight increase, but kind of maintain the service level so the amount that we're getting back from those property taxes actually does offset it so that we are making a surplus? Or does it mean that we are doing like floor? I think it's just going to be dependent on how much there is. But I would think that you would make some of a surplus based on that growth.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, the more development we get going forward and the more bodies we put into housing, whether it be rental or otherwise, the sooner we're going to have better income and hopefully a lessening requirement for a larger debt or levy on taxes.
Correct. And through the chair, I think that we really focus on the discussions here in regards to property taxes. But I think another thing to really look at too is having, those commercial areas in town as well. Commercial areas will actually brings in a lot onto the municipality, and that would actually really adjust your tax levy as well.
Not wrong. I think it's particularly about the commercial. You're bang on. I think things that need to be considered with respect to residential development is if you're adding 1,500 new homes, there's new streets, there's more garbage, there's more water, there's more requirements for library, library books or arenas or more programming and stuff like that. And so, in fact, it doesn't really help balance out the taxes to the degree you think it might. It may to some degree, but you add more people and you add more service requirements, and then you need to, add a staff on a plow, on a sidewalk plow. You need to get another, I guess it'd be the province now doing the recycling, but there's more bodies required to maintain that additional population. So really, well, development is generally perceived, I think, to be the knight in shining armor coming to save the town. That's not, in fact, what happens. You end up more or less in the same situation you were. If people are unwilling to raise taxes, then you're kind of
Base.
where you're at.
Yeah.
I think the commercial part is true. But it's something to consider. We need to stop looking at development as the only thing that's going to save us, because that is not in fact the case in my experience.
Right.
Other people may come and argue that, but in my experience, it just kind of stays on the level.
Through the chair, then, if I may.
Follow up, yes.
So just to clarify then, so I think what you're telling me is from a residential standpoint, for all the reasons you've already stated, it's maybe a wash or maybe a little bit of a saving, but if it were industrial or commercial development, that's where it would be a better thing for the taxpayer.
That's how I would perceive it. I mean, we do collect development charges, which sort of helps with that stuff. But there's certainly a pile of different changes coming with the development charges. We don't really know where that's headed.
Yeah.
So that's something I don't think we should be depending on to save us either.
Thank you.
Thank you. If we could come up with a plan to how to bring back industry and commercial, we could pass it on to the other levels of government, couldn't we?
Question?
I believe Councillor McCrae, you were next, and I may have missed someone else at that point.
Chair, my question's already been answered.
Thank you. Anybody else got any questions? Your worship.
Through you, I just wanted to ask Joanna, now that you've sat down, you commented on commercial development being a bit more of a positive development as far as income to the town. Just to put a positive note, I mean, we've talked about all sorts of negative things in the future about, borrowing more money and so on. Could you comment on that there is actually a couple of good projects, commercial projects in the works?
Oh, I have to go back and look at my list. I'm sorry, I'm a little under the weather. But yeah, we have had a lot of different commercial projects. The one that just immediately springs to mind is the GM dealership, which I think is nearly completed. And we've had a few projects in the industrial park that have been additions or new businesses coming to town. And then there's been a lot of building permits. I wouldn't want to be like very specific, but I know we've had quite a few commercial building permits for tenant fit ups within the downtown core. So that's a very positive, good news story.
Yeah, and there's development expansion in the industrial park.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions on that section? Deputy Mayor.
So Nev, are you saying that the town may borrow up $20 million by 2030, somewhere around there?
So through the chair, that's actually the max of the 40 million. So in that chart that I showed you here,
Yeah.
that's using the full debt capacity.
Okay, so what's your view? What's your crystal ball telling you we're going to do?
My crystal ball is telling me that we need to be prudent and understand all sides of the equation, which is the affordability and where we are financially. And that we all have to meet in the middle so that when you're not at 2031 and now you're really realizing what's going to happen in the next couple of years, that you're not putting in an astronomical amount of a tax levy to be able to offset that or to push off any critical infrastructure that you have to do just because there is no funding. I'm hoping that this new funding from the federal budget will help, and that as the years progress, we are moving that dial and that we actually get to a point with the capital levy in place where we're just kind of replenishing on our own and we're not using the debt anymore. Like we are actually using the debt strategically in a way that really is working for us instead of having to borrow, is what I see for the future.
And one further part. So what's the tax rate implication with the borrowing in a couple of years? Like what percentage of our tax rate increase will go towards borrowing?
I have that information, sorry, through the chair. I do have that information in our 10-year financial plan, so I can bring that to you. like I said, the amounts that get included to each year's budget will be the amount for the interest repayments
Mhm.
and the principal repayments. So that's what would be included into the levy. So I think right now, actually, I don't want to speculate at what the numbers are, but I can bring that up for sure. Yep, I have that information.
Yeah, so to me, it's kind of a, not necessarily a win-win, but the problem is we are gonna reduce our ability to, our tax rates are gonna be used to pay off debt, even to finish, to
Yep.
do projects we're doing. So we're really, in the future, councilors are gonna be saying, half my tax rate increase may be going to tax to paying off debt. This is why 20 years ago, we had the same discussion in Perth, is why we say we really don't want to take debt on unless we have to, but because your tax rates
Yes.
is
yeah,
all debt.
for sure. And through the chair, I think at this point, it's not a nice to have or an ask to have debt. You're kind of in the area of where you need to have debt to be able to move forward.
Yeah, and last question, I think, for this
Okay.
round here, Councillor
Through
McRae.
through you, Chair, to Nev. Any creative ideas on investment? Any way that you see that we can move money around that would be, and I know some of it you can't, okay? But that we could look into any way of possibly making money through investments.
Yeah, and through the chair, I think now, with the last decrease or the Bank of Canada rate that they had, the cost of borrowing, I'm hoping, will be decreased, but it's really looking at the amount that we have in our reserves. That's what's critical in doing those kind of creative investment ideas. So, you know, if we are in a position where we can maybe even borrow and make more through an investment, that is something that we definitely would look into. But at this point, I also don't want to deplete what we have in our reserves and have it in investment, because usually for an investment, for long term, for it to really pay off for the municipality, you would have to hold it in there for a while, right? It's kind of like our personal investments. You have to kind of ride, especially if you're wanting a larger return. But it's definitely investments and talking to the various banks in town and what we can do, and looking at different investment areas is something that we would explore in 2026 for sure.
Your worship.
One quick thing, I may have missed it in the budget. Is there any increase projected to parking fees?
So through the chair, I know that we were talking about increasing monthly parking rates, but I do believe that we're bringing new fees and charges up to council at the next committee of the whole meeting. Is that correct, Amanda?
I encountered somebody on the street and asking me about parking, and then I said, you know, it's $1 an hour. They just laughed. We're charging far too little for parking.
If you could move on to the next section, please.
So here I think is probably the most important section, and that is how does a budget that I'm proposing affect the taxpayer? So this first slide is based on a home assessed at $350,000 with a 7% increase as well as a 1% capital levy. So I wanted to take a moment here to just mention a few things. One, the assessed value of your home is not the selling value of your home. Usually they are closer than they are currently, but they are definitely not the same. So currently my house is assessed at this around this $350,000 mark, but I know that it would actually sell for almost double. So I wanted to ensure residents that they didn't think that this assessment value is the same as the selling value of their home. Secondly, I wanted to reiterate that this budget is for the town of Perth. So it relates to only the town of Perth's levy. So if you look at your tax bill and you say that it looks like nothing like the 2025 figures I'm about to show you in these charts, it's because your tax bill includes not only Perth's levy, but the county's levy as well. And that levy is used for the county roads, social services, and housing. So the 7% increase being proposed is intended to cover the following: inflationary pressures, as we discussed, which resulted in the utility and contract escalations, ensuring that we maintain current service levels for our residents, making modest contributions to our reserves, and covering our one-time operating costs. So for the average 350,000 assessed home, your tax bill would look something like this. An annual increase of about $244 for taxes and about $35 for the capital levy, which would be around $279 annually. I also thought everyone would want to know what the difference would look like between the different levy amounts. So here are the figures between 5 to 7% levy. The net change on a tax bill would be around $35. But what I wanted everyone to remember that every percent decrease in the levy would mean a requirement of $100,000 new dollars in funding or $100,000 of cost reductions. So the following slide shows the impact of the water and sewer rate increases on our residents. Again, the increase is used to offset costs from the construction price increases, ensuring our regulatory and environmental compliance, maintaining our current service levels, and again, providing some room for modest reserve contributions. The following shows the difference in the water billing amounts. We were able to calculate the average water bill this year to be around $182. On this, we would note about an $11 increase over the prior year. And since billing is completed on a bi-monthly basis, total annual change would be around $66 a year. Again, I wanted to show what the difference would be in the rate increases and the different percentages between 4 and 6%. Each would result in about a $1.83 change. So what does it look like altogether? The tax levy increase, a capital levy, and a water sewer increase. The total impact annually would be around $345, which would be around $28.75 a month. I am not saying that this is not a lot for individuals or families. What I'm saying is that this $30 a month will ensure that we have some financial stability in the future, maintain our current service levels, and continue to work on our infrastructure as needed to ensure the well-being of our residents.
Thank you. Questions? Councillor Bolt.
So Nev, I agree that, you know, a 6% change on your water bill isn't nearly as significant as it is on your taxes. And I agree that we have to plan for the future maintenance and development of our waters and our water and our sewers and capacities and so on and so forth. One of the biggest questions I get from constituents is, just like my electric bill, if I only had to pay for the cost only of the amount of electricity I used, as in water, I'd be happy as a clam. But it's the, you know, your water bill came to $35, but you owe for this billing, you owe $190. Why are the other charges so high? And are we consistent with other municipalities with those charges?
So through the chair, the water billing, I didn't really look at that. I mean, there are different avenues that you can do water billing with. What happens when you use water billing and you're just paying for what you use is that the infrastructure is still being used the same way. Whether you use, it's still there, it still needs to be replaced. So whether you're using a drop of water or a whole bunch of water, it's still the same maintenance that you need to do on that. I'm assuming that the municipality at one point had decided to complete their water billing the way that it had in regards to that. I don't have any water bills and I can't remember what's on mine in regards to the other charges, but I don't know if you have any other insight on that.
Yeah, so through the chair, so as Nev said, it's similar to the electrician that shows up your house to do something. He or she still has a fixed cost to buy their vehicle and tools and pay for licensing and insurance. Grant will go on about how we still have the fixed cost of having the water plant there to produce the water, whether we're producing 1 liter of clean water or 1 million liters, there's still that fixed cost. I used to live in Kingston where I had a water bill. They had the same way. There was still a fixed cost, just like your hydro bill that cost this much just to have the privilege of having the pipe connected to your home. And then there was a usage component on top of that. And for context there, I know the 192 seems like a lot. My bill for a single family home was, I think, $150 every month. So $300 every bi-monthly comparison to 192 here. So water, I think, is still pretty comparable to, or a great bargain compared to other places.
So if I could follow up with a comment on that. So yeah, I get where you're coming from, Michael. I just wonder, because it's commonly a question that's always asked, like, so I've got to charge for delivery, I got to charge for sewer maintenance, I got to charge for this, I got to charge for that. And yet my water only cost me $4 and I think it's $4.90 for 1,000 gallons. I mean, I would rather see us maybe increase the cost for the water. And where I'm going with this, is there a way we can find to simplify our water billing and or tweak it so that, because if we're looking at 6% per year in perpetuity, and that's why I asked the question about where are our reserves in water. From the report that I read here today, we're currently around 4 million. So I know you can spend $1 million putting in newer sewers real quick, but people are just, as Ed alluded to earlier, people, it may not sound like a lot of money, but it all adds up. And there are more and more people that are struggling. And that's why our food bank is being used more and more, and not just here, but everywhere. Like, we got to try, I feel we have to try to find ways to minimize these annual increases. So with water, I've never felt the need to have as much in reserve as I do for other infrastructure and so on, roads and all of that. Is there any way we can streamline our water billing system to have a less of an annual impact on our users? Because we all, each and every one of us in this room, need water.
So through the chair, I guess for context, Smith Falls has paid $19 million for a water tower grant. For how much the water and sewer component for Highway 7's projected to be? 9 million. So I know 4 million looks like a lot in the bank right now, but those two projects are, if our water tower is the same as Smith Falls, but I suspect it'll be less. But Highway 7 alone will be double what we have left in the bank right now. And I get the frustration. I put in low flow toilets in my house. I switched out all my light bulbs for LED and doesn't yell at my kids to turn off the lights and have short showers, but you don't see a difference in the bill. So I get the frustration.
All right, it's a commonly asked question. That's why I asked.
No, for sure.
Deputy Mayor.
We may have did this last year, but are we asking Roma to help us out in 26, 27 for Highway 7? Because it's their decision to do the street, but we're paying for it. And
Well, sorry, through the chair, they're paying for the surface and
Yeah.
which is their responsibility. We have pipes underneath. We could wait and do it at a different time, and then we'd have to pay for ripping up the road and replacing it.
No, but what I'm saying is, should we put that on the Roma delegation and sort of say, hey, can you guys help us out with, this is a huge project for a small town, right? I mean, I'm sort of trying to put not the blame on them, but sort of say, hey, we know you're doing Highway 7. We need some help here. This might be the year we sort of go to them and say, hey, because what's it going to cost us, Grant?
9 million.
9. So this might be the year we go to delegation, say, hey, $9 million is $9 million. I mean, our hands are tied. We have to do it, right? So it's like, hey, can you help us out? They may have a sympathetic ear if we give them a bottle of syrup or something. I don't know.
What, I'm not opposed to that at all. I think it's a great idea. But I'm just saying, is that a sufficient direction to staff that because before any conference, there's always do we need, if we can do a delegation or what we'd like included? Are we saying that as council now and giving staff a heads up that we want that? I think.
Chair, I support the suggestion of the deputy mayor for the upcoming conference.
Is that helpful to you then, as CEO?
Sure, I'd love to write another.
I think they're trying to get it as early as they can.
Well, today's the deadline.
Oh, is it?
So
What did
we'll
you
see what we
say?
can do. Today's the deadline for the Roma delegation request. We submitted one for the court security costs. I'll see what I can do to get the other one submitted today. Otherwise, Good Roads and AMO.
Okay, then we have even more reason to end the meeting early. So, free up staff, yeah. Any further questions in relation to that section? Seeing none, can we move on, please?
So while the town's budget is developed using the best information available at the time, it's inherently based on assumptions and priorities, meaning there are risks and uncertainties that could impact actual results. Key risks include inflationary pressures, market volatility, legislative or funding changes, and challenges in staffing and infrastructural renewal. To offset some of these risks, we have included contingency amounts of $250,000 for capital and $100,000 for operating. Perfect. So under strong mayor powers, the budget process has changed slightly. The town has usually provided a draft budget in November with final approval in December. Under the strong mayor powers, the mayor tables a budget before or by February 1st, which is what we're currently doing. But after this is where things get a little bit different. After tabling the budget, council has 30 days to propose amendments. If there are no amendments proposed, the budget will then be considered adopted. However, if amendments are proposed, this amendment period will be followed by a period where the mayor has 10 days to veto amendments, followed by council then having another 15 days to override the veto. If we were to follow the strong mayor amendment, veto, and override periods, we would not be able to approve and adopt the 2026 budget by December. In order to keep with prior year timelines, it would require the following. One, that council decrease the proposed amendment period from 30 days to 25 days, that the mayor would provide in writing their intent to forego the veto amendment timeline, and that council will then agree to waive the 15-day override. I know that this has been a lot of information, and I appreciate everyone's attention and the discussion that we've had, and I look forward to more discussion. But I also wanted to take a moment to really acknowledge all the staff. They really took a lot of time to have discussions with myself, and I feel really developed with intent and care their budgets this year. And I also wanted to say thank you to the treasurers in the county that really came to my aid and offered assistance during this budget process. I really, truly appreciate everyone's time and investment.
Yes, thank you for this extremely useful document and clear and concise document, and for everybody that helped create this. At this point, council, I'm going to give each council member a chance to, if they wish at this point, to make a statement in what informs their decisions in relation to the budget. The mayor kicked that off with a statement before the process. The deputy mayor made a statement during the course of the question times. So I'm going to go around the table and see if anybody wants to make a statement as to what informs their decisions and observations they make about where we are. And I'm going to go alphabetically around the table, and Councillor Bolt.
Where do I start? My biggest concern is not just about today. My biggest concern is looking into the future. It's been stated here today that we're going to hit our borrowing capacity by 2030, 2031 at the rate we're going. So I sit back and, 5 years goes by just like that, especially after you turn 70. The fact of the matter is, the financial future of this town as we see it now, based on the requirements we have to run this corporation, are bleak at best. As a council, we have to do our best to spend money as pragmatically as we can. And I fear that maybe we're not doing that in some areas. I think generally speaking, we do a pretty darn good job. But with the uncertainty of politically of where we're going since Trump got in, and now with all the demands that are being put on governments at all levels to change the way they fund things, current federal government borrowing $90 billion as if it was, a drop in the ocean, scares the hell out of me. And that is going to have far-reaching effects on every person who lives and pays taxes in Canada, let alone in Perth. So I wonder if fundamentally we as a council or as a town, as a corporation, shouldn't be looking at ways to find more efficiencies and run this corporation as tightly as we can. And I, for one, don't think we are. I think we're doing an okay job, but I think back of other councils where where the CAO of the time went to every department head, and I'm not saying you didn't do it this year, I know you have, but guys, let's do some soul searching and let's find out how efficiently we can drive this bus. And in almost 12 years as a councillor, for me to be sitting here and being asked to approve a budget of effectively 8% and then another 6% for water and sewer, I've never, ever been asked to do that. And I got to tell you, it scares the hell out of me to do it. So I feel that there is more room to find efficiencies in how we run this corporation, whether it be through not hiring more people, putting a hiring freeze on, which I thought we had, through attrition, whether it be finding ways to replace equipment with less expensive equipment if possible, or having equipment last longer. Hey, I understand, Grant, when a pump goes at the water plant, you got to replace a pump. That's a life-saving thing for the town. But when it comes to the day-to-day operations of running the corporation, I feel that we could work harder, and I feel we could find more savings. And I fear that we're running in the wrong direction financially. And for all of those reasons, I cannot support the budget as it is presented. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McCray.
Thank you, Chair. I think that I feel that we can't keep kicking the can down the road. And we heard that from, I think, the very first year when I sat on council, we heard that from our finance director at that time. It's unfortunate that for many years, not just this council, but councils across Eastern Ontario kept their taxes at a very minimal level. And now we've got ourselves in a predicament where we don't have the choices that they may have had. 6% we're treading water and barely treading water. 7% we may be able to slide out of the pool. And just as our mayor alluded to, we need to be thinking about not just the future of or the remainder of this council, but the next councils in the future, which I guess apparently those of the past forgot about. And I know that might sound very blunt, but it wasn't because it was a bad intention. It was just they were trying to keep the taxes as low as they can for the people in our community. As far as staffing, I think our staff are working as hard as they possibly can. They're working to the nine. And what we are paying for them, that's the cost of doing business and maintaining the professional level that is required to operate a municipality. They have to be on the mark all of the time because it's changing from minute to minute. Our world is changing, the information is changing, policies are changing, all of this information that's coming down from the federal and the provincial government is changing, and they have to be spot on. And I don't think that we can ask any more of our staff, because if we ask any more of them, then what's going to happen is we're going to lose them, or we're going to burn them out. So when it comes to asset management, we heard today how that these jobs have to get done. It's not that we have a choice. Again, a lot of it has to do with safety and security and liability, the liability issues surrounding these roads and buildings and things that have to be repaired. We're on a slippery slope. I'm in favor of this budget because I don't think we have any other choice.
Thank you.
Okay to go?
Yes, go ahead.
Well, first of all, I remember, I think it was about a year ago, and I remember the deputy mayor saying, get used to it. It's going to be 777 probably for quite a long time. As far as the presentation goes, I thought, Nev, you did a great job. It's probably the most detailed piece of work that I have seen in my 7 years on council. Very detailed, but pretty easy to understand. And I congratulate you on a good job. Thank you.
Councillor Waterfield.
Thank you, Chair. I will be supporting this budget, but with grave concern. I think that we need to go from the beginning, and as we look to budgets in future years, look at our principles. Do we want to offer the same level of services to our citizens? We need to be vigilant when it comes to expenses, and I won't repeat what some of my fellow councillors have just said, but we need to go line by line by line. I think there's an opportunity for us to be more vigilant when it comes to our expenses. On the other side of the ledger, looking at revenues, we get revenues broadly speaking, property tax, grants, fines, and fees, broadly speaking. I think we need to be much more aggressive when it comes to economic development. There was a discussion earlier with input from our Director of Developmental Services that when it comes to residential growth, it's kind of a wash. The opportunity is really through economic development, through commercial and industrial growth. If we were to take a walk around our town, there are many empty industrial infrastructures. They are privately owned. I feel there's a role for government in terms of promoting economic development and trying to see if we can get those industrial empty buildings filled. So going forward for the balance looking at next year, I would like to see this council work with staff and put a lot of emphasis in this area. And lastly, for this year, we're fine, but as has been pointed out, we need to keep the eye on the ball in the future with regards to the future finances of our town. This year is a warning signal. Let's get to work. Let's cut down on expenses. Let's be prudent. Let's generate more revenue. And I think economic development is probably one area in which we could find opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. If I may, if you'd indulge me now as a council member. What are the challenges we're having to rise to now and in the next 2 foreseeable terms? 2 truths can exist at the same time. One is that people are struggling financially and has been articulated by the deputy mayor as far as paying. The other truth is that for decades and decades and decades, municipalities in this province did not put money aside for future infrastructure. It wasn't through malfeasance or malice. It was just there was no long-term planning. And it wasn't going to be an issue for them or for the next terms that they were in. And here we are. We're not unique in this, but we're responsible for Perth. And we are in a position now where we're in mitigation and in triage, because for all the plans we make for assets, that can be trumped by something collapsing or catastrophic failure. That's where we are. And we have to recognize that reality. I am fortunate enough to be chair of this, so obviously it should be obvious to all of you that I would have started off by saying that I'm not in favor of this budget. Am I happy about it? Is it something we should go around dancing about? This is the situation we're in. We're not. But we were not voted in to make easy decisions. Those days have gone. We've heard it before in finances that one of the catastrophic things that has happened is with low or zero increases in taxes over decades, in what we can afford and what we can buy, it's actually a negative we're in now. We haven't got a time machine to go back and put all that right. So it's now just mitigation. And if we don't start doing the hard lifting now, and this started midterm last council when we had the wake-up call and the alarms, and it was only a minority of council there that were pushing the issue. This council has grasped that there is an issue, there is a crisis coming, and I think we're just arguing about the way we respond to that. But we're not going to solve the problem. It's coming. It's just how do we mitigate it? How do we extend it and hope that somehow the economy federally, provincially, and therefore locally reinvents itself with industry and commerce? Because they're the only things that drive money. The governments just recirculate it. And we've articulated here today the challenges that we have that our neighbors don't have. And they are the challenges that we are rising to. And we don't have to be happy about it. We just have to be responsible because we've neglected the future in the past. And we as a council, being aware of that, can't ignore it anymore. So, questions in relation to, any further questions in relation to the budget? Councillor Bolt and then the Deputy Mayor? No, because they made comments during the question times. The Mayor kicked off and the Deputy Mayor waded through. So, questions now in relation to Deputy Mayor.
Thanks. I have 3 questions. So the uncompleted projects for 2025 is pretty extensive. Are you concerned that the amounts that we budgeted for in 2025 are not going to be enough to cover off these budgets in 2026? Or was there always contingency amounts in all these things? And I'll maybe turn to Grant because a significant amount is Grant's department.
You're talking, sorry, through the chair, you're talking about the carry forward.
Carrying forward.
So the carry forward amounts were included in last year's budget. So
Yeah.
they're going to be, in theory, what should happen is that they're in the reserves based on those numbers and that they would just then carry forward. So there is no other additional funding that should happen with that.
No,
If-
no, not asking for funding. What I'm saying is we budgeted in 2025 to replace a pump. We didn't do it. We're moving into 2026. Is it going to cost me more money? Are we going to see the uncompleted projects from 2025 actually cost more than what we budgeted for in 2025? We
So-
don't know that yet.
No, so through the chair, what I've seen since I've been here is that hasn't been the case. You have carry forwards every single year.
Yeah.
If there's an amount that's actually going to be above the amount that you had approved for the project in the capital plan, then that would have to come to council for approval.
Oh, yes, that makes sense.
But no, I haven't
Yeah.
seen it since I've been here in regards to the cost being significantly different than what was budgeted for. Because we have included for the, the index and things like that. So year over year, I wouldn't see a big change. If it was a couple of years, then I think that would be more of a concern.
Okay, so I'll make the same comment I make every year. It seems like every year there's an awful lot of uncompleted projects always carried forward. And I wonder why that happens every year. I know we use COVID, for example, one time, it's hard to get stuff, but boy, there's a lot of uncompleted projects in 2025 that hopefully they get completed in 2026. And I hope in 2027, we don't see a lot of stuff in 2026 because to me, it's almost this comment about planning and knowing where we are and what we have to do and having staff to do it. And that's just one question. Second one is, from a cost recovery basis, does the town of Perth cover all their costs with all their services they offer? I'm including planning, engineering, recreation, town hall. I know for years we always said we give recreation a break because we want children to play sports. But what I'm asking is the town fully cost recoverable for all of their costs when they're offering services to outside agencies and people?
So through the chair, I just want to clarify that last piece. So are you asking like if user fees and things like that are
Yeah.
covering the cost? So I think at this point, they're not covering the full cost of all the programming and the infrastructure piece of it. If you're talking about operations, I think you'd be pretty close, but I think if we include capital and things like that, it would not. Even at the operational level, it doesn't include everything, but that is something that we've discussed department by department on how we get that closer and closer. So again, when we bring in the fees and charges, you will notice that they are different to bring that gap closer together. I forget what the other question was.
No, you've come. And
Okay.
my third question is, can you tell me how much is in the emergency contingency reserve at the present time? Is it still $750,000?
Yes, through the chair it is.
In your review, have we ever used that 750? I don't actually, Michael, you may know. I don't even know when we put this in, but we've never touched it, have we? And my comment is, it's from the emergency training the other day. If we have a major problem in the town of Perth, 1, we're going to declare. 2, we're going to ask for government money. 3, we're going to go through insurance. If we have a problem with the building, one of our buildings falls down, town hall burns down. Why do I have a $750,000 contingency that's never touched? To me, we're in an emergency contingency world now for my taxpayers. And I'm wondering, was any thought given to using some of this $750,000 in this time of the decade to offset some of the costs that we're facing to make the town of Perth a more affordable place to live?
So through the chair, from my perspective, when I came here, I think the first question I had was, why don't we have an operational reserve? Right? So for these purposes, you would actually put money away so that if the tax rate was too high or the levy was too high, you would use those reserves to be able to bring it down. We don't have anything like that. So I think in regards to the emergency levy, I would never want to take, and I mean, you can put more context in what the dollar value and how that dollar value was derived. But I think to take that away, and if something were to happen, then you're even in a worse position than before, because now your taxpayers are also going to have to pay for that amount that's there. So that would be my perspective. I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to add.
Sorry, but through the chair, just to answer your question about the carry forward, that is a discussion we have every year too about, are we planning for a reasonable number of projects that we can actually complete? I think with few exceptions, there's very few carry forwards from 24 still on the list. There's projects that take longer than a year because we started in the mid-year that naturally carry on. So I think that accounts for the bulk of them, but that is something we discuss every year. So.
Yeah, and I wasn't meaning to get rid of the contingency fund. I'm saying chip away at it a little bit in times of if the federal and provincial governments don't step up, municipalities are going to go broke. We can raise 6, 7, 8, 10% taxes every year. We're going to go broke. everybody's gonna go broke. We built stuff in the sixties at 10 cents on the dollar. We're now replacing it at 90 cents or 100, full dollar. So we've all been to a million conferences. We hear the same thing every year. We hear Rome is chasing AMO, AMO's chasing the government. We're borrowing $90 billion. It's like, we're never going to meet our asset management goals, right? But at the same time, I can't tax the taxpayers out of their homes. And there are people in the town of Perth, and I'm tired of hearing this argument is, let them move in with somebody else, or the old retired widow, maybe it's time for her to move in somewhere else. No, that's not the way the world should work. We have to, despite we have to meet our goals and obligations, we also have to be very critically aware of the challenges people are facing. And sometimes that 1 extra percent or that extra water bill is just too much. And I agree with someone made a comment. My mother-in-law lives alone. The water she uses is like $6, but the bill's $135 or whatever it is. Like, think about that sometime. But either way, I appreciate your comments. And it was a fabulous presentation. I really appreciate it. And I really do think the staff are working hard. And I think we need to do what we need to do. But I also have to represent the taxpayers.
Councillor McCray.
Through you, Chair, if I can just say one thing, and I hope that there's a lot of people listening. And that is, if you look around this table, I don't think there's any of us at this table are not aware and have a real passion and compassion for the people in our communities that are struggling. But also, I think if you look around at all of the individuals that sit at this council, we all work very, very hard with various community agencies and organizations to support them, whether it's the table, it's YAC, whether it's, jumping in the ice like Council Waterfield did for Hospice Hub. That was for Hospice Hub, or whatever it is. Every one of us are doing those kinds of things out in the community to try to support the social service, those people that are struggling. And we will continue to do that because we're very, very conscientious and very caring about our community. And this whole thing of this increase of 7% is nothing that we're taking lightly. Believe me, if there was another way, to the point that Councillor Waterfield brought up, we go line by line. We have gone line by line. This year we have, really dug deep. We've really drilled into the whole, every specific aspect of this budget to try to find ways and means to try to be more effective. I just wanted to close with that remark.
Thank you. Your Worship, please.
If the motion does not pass to approve the budget, the first motion, does it come back again and we analyze it again?
Either one.
Through the chair, yes, as in previous years, the very first budget meeting, we've presented the recommendations that we hope council are going to pass by the end of the process. So you can pass them today, you can pass them December 9th at the last council meeting. We're just presenting the motions and the recommendations in front of you. If you'd like more discussion yet on things, then we just defer them for now until a future meeting.
Thank you. So I remember, was it 2 or 3 years ago when Brian brought forth the budget and we were trying, like the good souls that we are, to reduce the effect on the taxpayer. And I shudder at what that night was like, we could save $7 here, we could save $1,200 there. And as a matter of fact, there were very few areas in which we saved money that we could reduce the impact on the taxpayer. I'll repeat what I said before. if we, as this council, do not approve the budget as presented, then some of those needs will just pass to next year and the next year and the next year. I fully appreciate the fact that some people are struggling, but we're in the business of doing our business, providing certain services and also providing other services that we want. I think it's not feasible to reject this budget. I think we have a very knowledgeable staff. They are far more about everything that we do than we do. They've worked very hard analyzing and analyzing again. And I think it would be, since this is my budget, I'll state my position. I will accept this budget as it stands.
Thank you, Your Worship. Any further questions? Seeing none, 5.1, Deputy Mayor, would you be prepared to move that motion?
Yep, moved by myself, as recommended by Committee of the Whole, be it resolved, the Council of the Town of Perth. Number 1, approve the draft 2026 mayor's budget. Number 2, direct staff to bring forth a bylaw to adopt the 2026 mayor's budget. Number 3, reduce the period as set out in subsection 7.3 of Ontario Regulation 3530-22 to pass a resolution making an amendment to the mayor's proposed budget from 30 days to 25 days. And 4, to reduce the period as set out in subsection 7.10 Ontario Regulation 530/2022 to override the head of council's veto of an amendment to the proposed budget from 15 days to 0 days as presented in report 2025 Cal 14.1.
Any further question? The motion is on the floor.
So those motions are, sections of the motion are contradictory, are they not? If you pass 1 and 2, then you don't pass 3 and 4. Is my correct?
Through the chair. So no, those are still required because under the strong mayor's legislation, you still have a window to veto it, and council then has windows after that to overturn your veto. So by passing those two, council's saying they're not going to overturn your veto, and then the idea would be that you issue a mayoral directive saying that you're not going to veto the budget.
So let's say the majority of council passes this motion. What then? Does that mean the motion is passed and the other 2 things are just add-ons?
No, council still has a window after that to overturn a veto that you may or may not issue on the budget, which I suspect you're not going to, since council in theory is approving your budget. So council's just saying or acknowledging that they have this window in the legislation to make further changes after that, and they're saying no, that we just are following this is our decision, and pending approval at a council meeting that our decision is going to stand.
So this is a controvertible motion. An if-then motion. If this happens, then this happens.
Somewhat.
If I may, through the chair. So I think the council this year, like this budget process replicates a budget process outside of the strong mayor powers, more so. And the reason that the 2 last provisions of the motion are included is to ensure that the strong mayor power legislation provides 30 days from the date that the budget is provided for council to make amendments. That alone would push the period of time in which council had to make amendments to the proposed budget to December 14th. So this is reducing the timeline to make sure that the legislative components through strong mayor powers align with the budget timeline that council has approved. So it's making sure that here the 30 days is being reduced to 25 days, which brings us to the December 9th council meeting. So we wanted to leave it open so that if there were amendments, council could pass amendments to the budget within the timeline, but that on December 9th, when which our budget timeline stipulates, we want to have the budget wrapped up and approved. that it coincides with that timing. So it's just to make sure that the legislative side of things for timelines align with the budget timeline process. So it's just a matter of housekeeping in that regard.
So, sorry, but how am I to
Follow up.
know whether council has accepted or rejected passing the budget according to the wording of what's set out there?
So this, I believe, is the intent of the motion, that they're approving the draft budget, directing staff to bring forth a bylaw to adopt the budget, but that they're reducing their timeline to make an amendment on the budget from 30 days to 25 days to coincide with the council meeting. So if they, for example, chose to make an amendment on December 9th, they could. But as Michael mentioned, we feel as though the idea here is that through the legislation, council needs to reduce the timelines to coincide with the budget timeline, and that you would issue a document stating that you won't veto the amendment.
So would council have the opportunity to go item by item, if they wished, through the draft budget?
I think the intent after today's discussion is that we're following a more normal budget procedure, and that collectively there's been discussion about the budget consideration for amendments. And so now that we've concluded to this point of the meeting and there weren't any, and there's a motion on the floor, the motion's reflective of staff bringing forth a budget to approve, a bylaw to adopt the budget. And this is required because instead of now council passing a bylaw to adopt the budget, the legislation dictates when the budget is deemed to have been adopted through a process, not by committee of the whole and council anymore. So what we want to make sure of, in order to align with our normal budget adoption process through bylaw, to align it with the December 9th council meeting, is that council pass the two last sections of the motion to make sure that the timing in the legislation aligns with the budget timeline process. So it's just a matter of housekeeping from that perspective.
Councillor Bolt, I think you have a question.
And I think that Amanda just answered my question. So if I were to vote against this, I'm not voting against the budget per se. I'm voting against the motion for the final budget.
This isn't clear.
So I think this motion at committee of the whole level is a recommendation to council, which when council passes the motion, it becomes a resolution. So your question was,
So basically, if by voting on this right now, if I vote against it, just say I vote against it, but it gets passed, it means that there still has to be a formal bylaw brought forward that has to be approved by council on the 9th to accept the budget.
correct.
All right. That
Yes.
clarifies my concern.
Any further questions? Motion is on the floor. I'll call the question. Those in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4. And Barry is also voting in favour, so Councillor Smith. Thank you. That's 5 nays on 2. So that motion is passed. Deputy Mayor.
Just want to let you know, I voted no now because I know this motion gives me time to think about some other things about the budget. And I'm not saying I'm going to vote no on the final vote, but I want to have some time to think about this. A lot of new information for me today.
Thank you.
So when will it come back? Oh, that's good.
At this point, it will come back on December 9th to the council meeting.
Well, Fine. That was a quick consultation there by the professionals. Next meetings, the special committee of the whole, I believe now will not be necessary on December the 2nd. The regular committee of the whole, Tuesday, December 2nd, 2025 at 5:30. My colleague, Councillor Jim Bolt, will be chairing. Next one, questions from the media. None online, no one in the house. So we're good. Adjournment, Councillor McRae, please.
Moved by myself that the special committee of the whole meeting held on November the 18th, 2025 be adjourned at 1:45 p.m.
Those in favour? It's unanimous. Thank you, Council.
Thank you.